Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Snoozy Scientist, where we wander gently through the deepest mysteries of our planet, one sleepy yawn at a time. Whether you're listening from your bed, wrapped in quiet blankets, or drifting through that gentle space where thoughts begin to blur, this calm spot has been made specially for you. A gentle space where curiosity and science sit side by side to help you relax. Tonight, we're traveling far back more than 360 million years into the Devonian period, a forgotten chapter when life was just beginning to understand what danger could be. Back then, the world looked nothing like it does today. Most of the planet was covered in ocean, and although these early seas were full of life, most creatures were delicate and slow, soft bodied and poorly defended, drifting through the water with almost no sense of fear. The idea of a true predator was still new, still undefined. And then something changed. Something appeared that seemed almost impossible for its time. A creature wrapped in armor, thick interlocking plates of bone, as if nature had forged a shield and then set it loose to hunt. Its jaws didn't simply bite, they accelerated, snapping shut with the force of a bear trap, driven not just by muscle, but by pure physics. A bite force so intense, it still challenges some of the greatest hunters in natural history. We know this because the fossils of other animals tell the story for us. Shells crushed, bodies split apart, armor shattered, as if it were nothing more than thin glass. And yet, for all its power, this creature remains a mystery. Only its massive armored head survives. Everything behind it, the body, the fins, the tail, has vanished into the silence of ancient seas, leaving scientists with questions instead of answers. But why did a predator so advanced appear in oceans still so young? How did it rise to dominance so quickly? What made it so successful? And why did it disappear almost as suddenly as it arrived? Tonight, we drift softly into those ancient waters to follow the rise and the quiet disappearance of Dunkleosteus, the creature that introduced fear to Earth's oceans. But before we sink too deep into the past, I just want to take a moment to appreciate every one of you who have been drifting off to these videos, liking them and leaving thoughtful notes in the comments. Your support is what allows this little corner of calm to keep growing. Thank you. And if you feel like it, tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. It's always a joy to see how far these sleepy stories drift across the world. So now, take a deep breath in, let it out slowly, and together let's sink into the Devonian to witness the moment fear first entered the sea. If we travel back through time, drifting gently past memories of rising continents and ancient seas, we arrive in an era where Earth was still learning what shape it wished to take. This was long before mammoths and dinosaurs, before forests reached into the sky, and before the modern oceans found their familiar rhythm. The Devonian felt like the planet's first great breath, a world suspended in a moment of transformation, neither primitive nor complete. The continents were not arranged as we know them, they were scattered and unfinished, pieces of land drifting slowly across the surface of the planet. These early continents were smaller, almost shy. Some were clustered near the equator, others sat near shallow, sun-warmed seas, where land met water, long coastlines wrapped around the edges, their outlines softened by the gentle erosion of ancient waves. Most of the planet's surface was ocean. It spread in every direction, reaching farther than the eye could have followed. These seas were calm in some places and unpredictable in others. They were not deep and clear like the great basins we know today. Much of the Devonian Ocean was shallow and filled with sunlight. Warm light stretched down through the water, stirring life into motion. It was a world that invited new possibilities, and life answered. Currents moved slowly, The water carried minerals from distant shores and stirred them through the shallows. Clouds drifted above in familiar shapes, and the air was warm and often stable. Yet beneath that calm, something restless was waiting. The planet was steady but never still. Volcanic forces shifted the sea floor, rivers carved into stone. Mountain ranges were only beginning their long journey toward the sky. These waters were rich with nutrients. Rivers carried the ancient dust of early landscapes into the sea, and the oceans responded. Plankton filled the surface in dense, shimmering clouds. Early coral grew in strange shapes, different from the reefs we know today. The water was alive with tiny creatures. They hovered near the surface, feeding, drifting, multiplying. They formed the base of an entirely new food web, one that would soon shake the oceans. But the Devonian was not simply peaceful. It lived on the edge between stability and change. The climate was largely warm, yet the balance was delicate. Slight shifts in the atmosphere or in the chemistry of water could transform entire ecosystems. This tension gave the era its character. Life had enough comfort to expand, but enough uncertainty to demand adaptation. While the seas offered endless room to grow, something remarkable was happening on land. The first true forests began to appear, not forests as we imagine now, with towering trees and thick canopies, but the first bold experiments in plant life. Small trees rooted themselves in ancient soils, mosses and ferns unfurled across the ground. Root systems spread deep into the earth and held the soil in place. These early forests began to reshape the planet in a way few creatures ever had. The roots pulled minerals from the ground and carried them into streams. Rain washed those minerals into the ocean. The chemistry of the water changed. It carried more nutrients and different elements, and these shifts stirred evolution into motion. Life responded with creativity. New body plans emerged. New senses and new strategies for survival appeared. The oceans were no longer just places of drifting and chance. They were becoming arenas where competition pushed species to innovate. The Devonian seas were filled with fishes of every kind. Early sharks swam through the water with slender bodies and flexible tails. Primitive armored fishes shuffled near the sea floor. Tiny jawless creatures filtered food from the current in silence. It was a world where predators were still learning how to hunt and prey was still learning how to hide. It was a world filled with open opportunity. Everywhere the seas pulsed with change. Food was abundant. Light poured into the water. Currents brought nutrients from distant shores. The ocean surface was alive with microscopic life, and deeper waters stirred with larger creatures. There was space to grow, and every empty niche invited something new to fill it. Evolution thrives where there is pressure. The Devonian offered both comfort and challenge. It gave life warmth and nutrients, yet it also shifted and changed without warning. Entire coastlines were lost under rising seas. Volcanoes altered the climate. Forests changed the chemistry of rivers and oceans. With every shift, life had to decide how to answer. Some creatures grew armor, others grew faster or more agile. Some adapted to the light, others to the dark. There was no single path forward, only the promise that survival would belong to those who could change. It was a moment in Earth's story when innovation was not optional. It was the only way to continue. If the early oceans had been empty or hostile, life may have retreated. If the waters had been too still, evolution may have slowed to a quiet drift. But the Devonian was alive with possibility. It was stable enough to allow growth, yet unpredictable enough to demand resilience. It created a world where new forms of life could emerge and thrive. The stage was set, the oceans were waiting, and deep within those sunlit waters, life was about to step into an entirely new chapter. Long before the armored jaws of Dunkleosteus appeared in the Devonian seas, the oceans were ruled by quiet lives. For millions upon millions of years, Early creatures swam through calm water with little to fear. These were delicate animals, small and slow moving. Their bodies were soft and simple. They drifted and fluttered, guided more by the push of the current than by any need for speed or power. In those ancient days, the idea of strength had not yet taken shape. The ocean was filled with gentle experiments in survival. Most fish were small and slender. They had little muscle and even less protection. No plates of bone guarded their bodies. Their skin was thin and easily torn. A single bite would have been enough to end them, yet no creature had evolved the jaws to deliver such a bite. In a world without true hunters, there was little reason for armor or speed. Life grew quietly, unchallenged and untested. It is easy to imagine the water as a soft mosaic of movement. Tiny fish hovered near the surface, catching particles of food drifting down from the shallows. Other creatures settled near the sea floor and simply waited. They filtered the water, feeding in slow, peaceful rhythms that had been unchanged for countless generations. There was no race for dominance. There was no need for stealth or ambush. The world had not yet learned aggression. It was a world balanced in stillness. The oceans had space for countless species, and many of them looked similar. These early fish lacked variety. Their bodies shared the same basic form. They had narrow tails and thin muscle fibers. Their fins were simple and moved with gentle strokes. Their mouths were not built for biting. Most of them swallowed food whole because there was no reason to tear or crush. Without predators, the ocean felt open and calm. It was a place where survival followed slow patterns and nothing seemed urgent. This absence of threat created what scientists call an evolutionary vacuum. There were empty roles waiting to be filled. Nature had not yet discovered what it meant to hunt or defend. Opportunities were everywhere. Any creature that could become faster, stronger, or more protected would instantly shape the world around it. All it needed was a spark of change. The Devonian was the moment when those sparks began. Life was ready to expand, and the oceans responded with a burst of creativity. New species evolved at a pace never seen before. New forms appeared as if the water itself was sculpting them into being. Modern scientists often call this time the Age of Fishes. It is a name that fits the world perfectly. Fish were everywhere. They filled every shallow sea and quiet reef. They swam across wide open oceans and clustered along ancient coastlines. Yet even though fish were plentiful, they were still early in their story. Most of them had bones no thicker than paper. Their bodies were light and easy to move but fragile. A single scrape against sharp coral might have been enough to injure them. Their fins were thin and delicate. Their eyes were small and still learning how to see in murky water. They were explorers, discovering their own senses, not yet threatened by anything stronger than themselves. The absence of major predators allowed all of this to continue for millions of years. Without danger, the oceans grew more crowded. New species appeared and evolved side by side. Prey did not need to hide or camouflage. They did not yet know fear. Many of these creatures had no shells and no scales. Some did not even have jaws. They were living in a world that had not yet imagined teeth or the strength to use them. But this peaceful world carried within it the promise of change. Life is always searching for new ways to grow. When food is easy to find, and when nothing stops a species from expanding, the conditions are perfect for evolution to take bold steps. That is what was happening in the Devonian. The seas were warm and rich. Forests on land began to alter the chemistry of water. The oceans gathered nutrients and energy. Life began to push against its own limits. In such a world, even the smallest advantage mattered. Fish with slightly stronger jaws could eat larger prey. Those who swam a little faster could reach food others missed. A creature that developed a hint of armor could survive injuries that would have killed others. These differences were tiny at first, barely noticeable, yet across millions of years they carved the path towards something new. The oceans were still quiet, yet there was a subtle shift. The first simple jaws appeared. The earliest teeth began to grow. Fins changed shape, and body plans slowly diverged. The seas that had once been filled with gentle movement began to prepare for a different kind of life, a world where power and protection would start to matter. These early fish did not know it, but they were living in a moment of transition. Their simplicity created space for something else to emerge. The Devonian oceans were ready for innovation. They were ready for the first strong hunters to appear. For now, the water still moved softly, and the small, unarmored fish drifted in peace, unaware that the age of gentle living was nearing its quiet end. As the Devonian seas continued to fill with life, something entirely new began to appear beneath the surface. It happened slowly at first, the way most great changes on Earth do. Tiny shifts in anatomy and structure, small differences that passed from one generation to the next. Over long ages, those differences gathered weight and began to reshape the living world. Among the delicate fishes drifting in soft water, there emerged a strange new form. Its body was not wrapped in skin alone. Hard material began to cover its head and shield its body. Plates of bone fused together, piece by piece, until the creature looked as if it wore a suit of armor. Scientists call this early group of armored fish placoderms. They were not like the fragile creatures that had come before. They carried the first true defense that nature had ever perfected, a natural shield built into the very structure of their bodies. This armor did not look like the scales of modern fish. It did not bend softly or shimmer in the light. It was solid and heavy. It had edges like stone and surfaces that caught the current with a quiet strength. The plates locked together like tiles on an ancient roof. Each piece was shaped to protect a delicate place beneath it. Over the head, across the shoulders, and sometimes along the body, the plates formed a barrier between the creature and the dangers of the deep. Before placoderms appeared, most fish had been held together by cartilage. Cartilage is soft and flexible. It bends easily. It allows the body to twist and move with little effort. Many early fish depended on it because their lives required little force. They needed to swim gently and drift along the current. But armor changed that balance. Bone plates were rigid. They could not bend or fold. They turned soft bodies into living fortresses. This new invention changed survival forever. For the first time, the oceans held creatures that could not be easily injured. A bite to the head no longer meant certain death. A scrape against coral no longer tore open skin. Placoderms could swim into territories where fragile fish would never dare to go. They could search for new food sources and explore deeper waters. They could defend themselves in battles that would have destroyed most other creatures. The first armored bodies did more than protect. They reshaped the rules of life. When an animal is safe from harm, it can grow larger and stronger. It can pursue prey that once would have escaped. It can move into environments where survival demands more than speed or caution. Armor transformed the placoderms into explorers and hunters. They were not merely passive residents of the sea. They became part of the first arms race in Earth's history. But nature rarely gives a gift without a cost. Heavy armor made every movement harder. It required more energy to swim. It slowed the body and resisted the currents. It forced placoderms to grow stronger muscles and more powerful tails. Every advantage placed another burden on survival. To carry such weight demanded more food. It required new strategies and better senses. The ocean rewarded armor, but it also tested those who wore it. That is part of why nature does not attempt full body plating very often. Armor provides protection, Yet it can also limit what a creature can become. It makes the body rigid, it sacrifices flexibility for defense. A fully armored fish cannot twist quickly. It cannot accelerate with sudden bursts of speed. It cannot slip through small spaces or glide in tight curves. It trades grace for strength and agility for endurance. Most of the time, evolution chooses a different path. Rather than covering the entire body in bone, it uses lighter structures. Scales appear instead of plates. Skeletons grow inside the body rather than on the surface. Cartilage and bone work together, each used only where it is needed most. Full armor is rare because it carries a heavy price. Only in very specific environments does it allow life to thrive. Yet during the Devonian, the advantages of armor far outweighed its costs. The seas were a place of change. New creatures were appearing that pushed against the limits of what was possible. With protection, placoderms could challenge the world around them in ways their ancestors never had. They could use their safety to grow bolder and more inventive. They could focus on hunting and exploration instead of simply surviving. The armored head was especially important. It created a foundation for something much greater. Beneath those thick plates, new jaw structures began to develop. Muscles anchored to bone, hinges formed where cartilage once would have been. The skull became a powerful machine, strong enough to withstand enormous forces. This was the beginning of a new direction in evolution, one that would eventually shape the most formidable predator of its age. Life had built its first tank, not a machine of war, but a creature born from millions of years of quiet change. It carried the lessons of the past on its back and moved slowly through the water. Its armor spoke of protection and possibility. Beneath that hard surface, new ideas were forming, ideas that would change the oceans forever. The simple bodies of earlier fish no longer held all the answers. The Devonian was becoming a world that rewarded strength, innovation, and risk, and the armored placoderms were the first to show how far life could go when it dared to build something entirely new. The Devonian seas did not stay quiet for long. The appearance of armored fish changed more than survival. It changed the direction of life itself. For the first time in Earth's oceans, protection made room for confidence. A creature could move through the water without fear of every brush or impact. It could explore deeper places and attempt new strategies. That subtle shift opened a door to another possibility. If a body could be protected, then perhaps a body could also become a weapon. The earliest steps were small and almost invisible to the eye. While many placoderms continued to drift and graze, others began to experiment with speed and strength. Their bodies were still heavy, yet the world around them was changing. Food was plentiful, and competition was rising. Some fish began to grow larger muscles, not for fleeing, but for pursuit. Others developed tails that pushed them faster through the water. Life was learning to move with intent. The true transformation began inside the head. We often think of predators as defined by their speed or strength. Yet evolution did not begin with those qualities. It began with the jaws. Before this moment in time, jaws had been simple things. They opened and closed like gentle hinges. They were meant to gather food, not to strike. But nature began to experiment with new mechanics. Bones fused together in different shapes, muscles attached in stronger ways. These early modifications gave creatures the ability to bite with force and precision. Jaw mechanics became the revolution that reshaped the sea. The jaw is a lever, and a lever can multiply power. With the right arrangement of bone and muscle, a jaw can snap shut faster than muscle alone could pull. It can crush, slice, or tear. The first creatures to gain this power were not yet the monstrous predators to come. They were early prototypes, built by nature as if she were testing different designs. Some placoderms developed jaws that swung upward with surprising speed. Others evolved sets of bone plates that acted like blades. Even the smallest improvements changed the balance of the ocean. A fish with a stronger bite could crack open new food sources. It could eat shelled animals or tear into prey that was once too tough. It could defend itself against other armored creatures. A new kind of competition began to shape the water. The rise of these fast striking hunters did not happen overnight. It unfolded gradually across millions of years. As one group evolved stronger jaws, another responded with thicker armor or faster movement. The oceans became a place of innovation, not just in body shape, but in how creatures interacted. Hunters pursued, prey resisted, and each new design encouraged another. The evolutionary vacuum that had existed for so long was beginning to fill. In the shallows, some fish took advantage of the sunlight. They developed eyesight sharp enough to detect movement through cloudy water. They waited still and patient, bodies angled for attack. When prey came near, their jaws snapped shut with a burst of speed. These early hunters were learning the art of precision. They did not need long chases, they needed only a moment. Other experiments happened deeper in the sea. Some species traded speed for power. Their jaws closed slowly, but with immense crushing force. They fed on the tough shelled creatures that lived near the sea floor. Their bodies were thick and slow moving, yet they held a quiet advantage. They did not need to swim fast, they needed to bite once. Each adaptation carried a memory of what came before. Nature did not discard older forms, she refined them, layering change upon change. Armor did not vanish. Instead, it combined with stronger jaws. Fins became more sculpted, bodies grew thicker and more streamlined. The ocean was no longer a place where life drifted aimlessly. It was becoming a place where strategy mattered. These early experiments did not always succeed. Many species that tested new forms eventually disappeared. Some designs were too heavy, others were too fragile, yet every failure left a trace. A small change in jaw structure, a new placement of bone, a slightly different angle of muscle. Nature kept what worked and let the rest fall away. The creatures that eventually led to Dunkleosteus were part of this long lineage of trial and discovery. They were not yet giants, and they were not yet perfect, but they held the first hints of what was coming, a body designed not only to survive, but to dominate, a skull strong enough to anchor a powerful jaw, muscles arranged like a suspension system, ready to unleash force. Fins sharpened into tools of control rather than balance. With every generation, the idea of the predator became sharper. From gentle grazers, life had created something new, a creature that did not only react to the world, but shaped it. The ocean began to hold its breath because the age of slow and passive living was fading. The lineage that would one day give rise to Dunkleosteus was taking shape. Quietly, patiently, it was learning what it meant to strike with intent. Long after the Devonian seas had fallen quiet and the armored giants vanished from the world, Earth carried their memory in silence. For ages, the layers of rock kept their stories hidden. Sediment pressed down on ancient reefs and seabeds. Oceans retreated and returned. Mountains rose and broke apart. Time rearranged the planet, folding history into stone. Then, one day in a much later world, the clues began to surface. It did not happen in one moment or in one place. The story of Dunkleosteus was uncovered piece by piece, scattered across continents that did not even exist when the creature was alive. The most famous discoveries were found in the Cleveland Shale of North America. These rocks were once the floor of an ancient sea. What is now land was once water, warm and filled with life. When scientists first explored those dark layers of stone, they found something startling. Great plates of bone, thicker than any fish bone that had ever been seen, were embedded in the rock. Some were shaped like helmets, others were curved and hinged. Together they formed the armored head of an enormous predator. Fossils were found in other places too: Europe, Morocco, Russia. Everywhere the pattern was the same: heavy plates of bone, smooth and polished by the passage of time. Fossils so large that early researchers at first had trouble believing they belonged to fish. These remains looked like the remains of something more ancient, almost prehistoric in design. With each new discovery, the picture grew clearer. The creature that once ruled the Devonian oceans had not been rare or isolated. It had been widespread and successful, yet there was a mystery hiding in the fossils. Only the head remained. The powerful armored skull, the jaws that once snapped with terrifying speed, the thick plates that protected the throat and shoulders. Everything behind that front shield was gone: the body, the tail, the fins, the spine. All the delicate parts that made the creature move had vanished. Scientists believe the explanation is simple. The head was made of bone so strong and so mineral rich that it fossilized easily. The rest of the skeleton was not bone at all. It was cartilage. Cartilage is light and flexible. It bends and moves with the flow of the water. It is perfect for swimming, but it does not last through the ages. It decays quickly after death. Unless conditions are perfect, cartilage leaves no trace. Time erases it as if it never existed. This absence leaves us with questions. The missing body is not just an empty space, it is a puzzle. A creature defined by its head alone raises endless speculation. How large was the rest of Dunkleosteus? How powerful were its muscles? Was it fast or slow? Was its body thick like a tank or shaped for speed? Without the rest of the skeleton, we cannot answer directly. We can only infer what might have been. Scientists turn to clues in other species. They compare the head structure to related placoderms. They analyze the attachment points on the skull where muscles once anchored. They build digital models to test how those jaws might have moved. Each method adds a new layer of understanding, yet no method reveals the complete picture. The ocean keeps its secrets carefully. Reconstructing Dunkleosteus is a delicate challenge. Some early drawings imagined it with a long eel-like body. Others gave it a short, powerful frame. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. New research suggests a muscular torso, shaped for sudden bursts of motion, but every new fossil shifts the picture slightly. With each discovery, the image sharpens, then changes again. This uncertainty has become part of the fascination. Dunkleosteus exists in the space between what we know and what we imagine. The fossil plates are unmistakable. They tell us that this creature was powerful beyond any predator that had come before. They show us the mechanics of an extraordinary jaw. They speak of strength and design, but they also remind us of what we do not know. The missing body invites debate, imagination, and theory. Scientists discuss it in museums and laboratories. They build models. They test ideas. They compare the fossil record to every clue hidden in related species. Each question leads to another. Was Dunkleosteus sleek or bulky? Did it glide through the water or move with quiet bursts of speed? How large was its tail? How did it breathe? How did it swim? Every possibility is a doorway to the next. This is the gift of incomplete fossils. They leave room for wonder. The rock preserves just enough to show us what the creature was capable of, but not enough to explain everything. The silence of the missing pieces becomes part of the story. In this way, Dunkleosteus remains both known and unknown. Its armored head is preserved in stone, heavy and undeniable. Its body is carried only in the memory of evolution and in the echoes left behind in other species. The mystery reminds us that even the strongest creatures leave only fragments when the ocean finally lets go. If we imagine Dunkleosteus for a moment, not as a fossil in stone, but as a living creature moving through warm Devonian water. Its power does not begin with its size or its armor, it begins in the structure of its head. Everything about this animal was shaped around the idea of force. Its skull was more than a shield, it was the framework for one of the most remarkable weapons nature had ever created. The jaw of Dunkleosteus was not like the jaws of modern fish. It did not depend only on muscle or speed. It was built in two parts that worked together like a machine. The upper and lower plates did not meet like simple jaws. They pivoted in a coordinated motion, each part connected to a system of bones and hinges. When the mouth opened, the plates rotated away from one another in a wide arc. When they closed, the plates snapped back together with a perfect fit. There were no teeth. The edges of the bone itself formed sharpened blades. The jaw plates were made of thick bone, layered like the trunk of an ancient tree. Fossilized remains show alternating patterns of dense and porous material. The outer layer was hard as stone. It protected the surface and kept the edges sharp. Beneath it was a network of tiny channels and fibers. These layers did more than provide strength. They reduced weight without sacrificing protection. They absorbed shock and let the jaw endure immense pressure. Scientists have studied these plates closely. They have scanned them, mapped their structure, and compared them to the jawbones of other animals. The pattern is always the same. Dunkleosteus carried a weapon that was both powerful and precise. It could strike with crushing force, yet the bone architecture was flexible enough to avoid breaking during impact. Even in fossil form, the edges still appear sharp. Some paleontologists believe those edges sharpened naturally as they rubbed against one another during feeding, but the bones were only half of the story. The skull itself held the clues to something even more interesting. Along the surface of the fossil plates, tiny ridges and bumps are visible. These are not cracks or random shapes. They are the places where muscles once anchored. They mark the points where sinew and tissue attach to bone, pulling the jaw open and shut in coordinated motion. These marks show that the muscles were arranged in a specific pattern. They did not simply close the jaw, they linked to a mechanical system inside the skull that magnified their force. This system worked like a lever. A lever can make a small movement produce a large result. When Dunkleosteus opened its mouth, the muscles pulled on the bones in such a way that the lower jaw dropped quickly and widely. At the same time, the upper jaw lifted. The skull acted like a trigger. When the muscles contracted, they released the stored tension and snapped the jaws closed. The motion was so rapid that it generated suction. Water rushed into the open mouth and dragged prey inward before the jaws even met. What made this mechanism so unusual was the speed and the precision. Most early fish had jaws that opened slowly or with limited force. Their bones were not shaped for leverage. Their muscles worked directly against resistance. Dunkleosteus broke that pattern. Its jaw system multiplied power through geometry. The pivot points and bone lengths were arranged so that small movements at the back of the skull produced massive force at the front. When the jaws closed, they did not simply bite down, they clamped together with the strength to split prey apart. This two-part system also explains why Dunkleosteus could open and close its mouth faster than any other fish of its time. Muscle alone can only move so quickly, but when muscle is combined with a lever system, motion becomes explosive. The jaws did not need long bursts of force. They needed only a single instant. Fossil evidence suggests that the jaws could accelerate so rapidly that the motion happened in a fraction of a second. The closing force was immense, yet the opening force was just as impressive. The system worked in both directions. Even today, scientists study the physics of this mechanism. They have built digital models to simulate the jaw movement. They have measured the angles and compared them to modern animals, Many modern predators still use similar systems: crocodiles, giant groupers, sharks. Yet Dunkleosteus carried this design millions of years earlier. It was one of the earliest examples of a true mechanical predator, a creature whose power came not only from strength, but from engineering. Every ridge in the fossil plates whispers the same story. Every hinge and pivot tells us how the jaw moved through water. The skull was not just protection, it was an instrument of motion, shaped by natural forces across deep time. When Dunkleosteus struck, it did not rely on luck. Its jaws were built to ensure success. The rest of the body may be lost to time, but the skull remains, clear and unmistakable. It holds the memory of one of nature's first great predators. In those layered bones and in the marks left by ancient muscles, we see how the ocean began to change. The quiet world of drifting fish was gone. A new kind of power was taking shape, a power built not just from size or strength, but from the perfect balance of structure and motion. When the Devonian oceans filled with armored hunters and fast-moving prey, the world began to witness a kind of strength that had never been seen before. It was not the power of claws or speed. It was the power held in the jaws of Dunkleosteus. Scientists have studied those fossil plates carefully. They measured the angles and the places where bone anchored muscle. From those measurements, they calculated the force that this predator could unleash. The numbers tell a story almost too immense to imagine. Models suggest that when the jaws of Dunkleosteus closed, they could generate a bite force of several thousand pounds of pressure. Some estimates reach high enough to rival the strongest jaws in the animal kingdom. If we compare it to a modern shark, the difference is striking. The great white shark is famous for its power. It can crush bone and tear through flesh, yet its bite is driven by muscle alone. Dunkleosteus used mechanics that multiplied power far beyond what muscle could provide. The first part of the jaw pulled downward. The second part snapped upward. The skull released the force as if it were a spring. Some scientists have compared the jaw power of Dunkleosteus to that of a crocodile. Crocodiles have some of the strongest jaws alive today. Their power comes from thick muscle and a skull built to handle shock. But crocodiles close their jaws relatively slowly. Their strength is in the crushing pressure they hold once they have bitten down. Dunkleosteus was different. Its jaws closed quickly and powerfully in a single instant. It had speed and force working together. In many ways, it combines traits from modern hunters into one ancient design. Even the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, which lived long after the placoderms disappeared, used a different kind of force. The jaws of Tyrannosaurus rex delivered a bite that crushed bone with unbelievable strength. Yet that power was focused on downward pressure. It used the weight of its skull and massive muscles to drive the teeth into bone. Dunkleosteus did not rely on teeth. Its power came from the sharp bone plates and the way they moved. The jaw worked like a pair of shears. When the plates came together, they cut and crushed at the same time. This design held a secret that has fascinated researchers for decades. The edges of the jaw plates were self-sharpening. As Dunkleosteus opened and closed its mouth, the upper and lower plates slid past each other. The contact between them wore away tiny fragments of bone. This constant movement kept the edges sharp. The jaw did not dull with use. It became sharper the more it was used. This is a rare adaptation in the animal world. It meant that Dunkleosteus did not need to replace teeth. The jaw could continue cutting and crushing for its entire life. With each bite, the predator shaped the world around it. The force it unleashed was strong enough to split the shells of armored prey. It could crush the bodies of fish protected by thick plating. The jaw did not need to find weak spots. It created them. A single strike might have shattered bone and split shell. Scientists have found fossil evidence that tells this story clearly. Shells with deep cuts, armor plates broken in half, Fossils appear with bite marks that match the shape of Dunkleosteus jaw plates. The patterns in the bone show how the predator struck. Some marks are clean and sharp, others show crushing and splitting. These fossils are the ancient traces of meals long finished. They sit in stone like frozen moments of time. They show us that Dunkleosteus did not hunt soft bodied prey alone. It pursued creatures with strong defenses. It fed on early sharks. It cracked the shells of ancient cephalopods. It attacked armored fish that had evolved protection for survival. The bones and shells of these creatures tell us what the jaws were capable of. The marks reveal the same pattern again and again. The predator struck with a force that was unmatched in its time. When we imagine that force in the water, we can sense how the Devonian oceans began to change. Dunkleosteus did not have to chase prey over long distances. It needed only one moment to end a struggle. The jaw opened quickly, creating a sudden vacuum that pulled prey into its mouth. Then it closed with a power that turned armor into fragments. This combination of suction and crushing made Dunkleosteus a master of its environment. Even today, the jaw mechanism remains one of the most studied features in paleontology. Engineers and biologists build models to understand how the bones moved. They test the angles and the speed. They map the stress points and the force distribution. With every new study, the picture becomes clearer. This predator was not simply strong, it was designed with precision. When we look at the fossil plates, we see more than old bones. We see the record of an ancient experiment in power. We see the moment when hunting took a new shape. The bite force of Dunkleosteus was not just a number, it was a new chapter in the story of life. It changed the way predators and prey interacted. It reshaped the balance of the ocean. It reminded the world that survival can come from strength and from the elegance of the mechanisms that nature creates. For a creature as powerful and mysterious as Dunkleosteus, there is a quiet irony in how much of its body has been lost to time. The fossil record holds its armored head with remarkable clarity. The jaw plates remain sharp. The skull is heavy with ancient memory, but the rest of the body has vanished. There is no full skeleton to guide us. There are only fragments of cartilage and the faintest traces of where muscles once pulled and flexed beneath thick armor. Yet from these fragments, science has worked patiently to imagine the shape that must have followed behind that armored skull. The first and simplest question is one that still inspires debate. What did Dunkleosteus really look like as it moved through the water? Some of the earliest reconstructions imagined a long and eel-like body trailing behind the heavy head. The idea was built on comparison to other placoderms with slender frames. Their bodies tapered beautifully, flowing in long curves through ancient seas. Others imagined a short and thick body, as if the predator were a floating fortress. Both ideas grew from limited evidence and creative interpretation. More recent discoveries have encouraged a different vision. The skull plates of Dunkleosteus tell their own quiet story. Along their edges are grooves and ridges where muscles once anchored. These marks are more than surface texture. They show us where strength gathered. They reveal how force was distributed across the head. From these clues, researchers infer that Dunkleosteus likely carried a muscular body capable of sudden bursts of motion. The skull hints at power not just to bite, but to move. Scientists often study these scars, the same way archaeologists might examine tool markings. Each ridge and depression is a trace of movement. The points where bone thickens suggest where muscles attached in clusters. These clusters were not arranged for slow drifting, they were arranged for forward thrust. They suggest a predator that could accelerate with surprising speed. There are other reasons to believe Dunkleosteus was neither slow nor clumsy. The shape of armored fish reveals a balance between protection and movement. Armor adds weight, but it also changes the way water flows along the body. Hydrodynamics shapes the ocean as much as evolution does. Creatures that move through water must obey these rules. Their bodies become streamlined or angled. Even armor can become part of the design that cuts through water. Ancient placoderms show evidence of this. Their bodies curve gently rather than forming rigid blocks. Their fins spread out from the head and shoulders in ways that guided water in smooth currents. The plates themselves created surfaces that stabilized movement. In Dunkleosteus, those surfaces extend in a pattern that would have balanced the skull. The body behind it, though lost to time, likely mirrored this design. Powerful muscles would have needed a strong anchor. The head plates show the marks of those attachments. When we imagine Dunkleosteus moving through the Devonian seas, it becomes clear that speed and power were not opposites, they worked together. This predator did not need to sprint over long distances. It needed only to move with sudden force. Its jaws could strike in an instant. To use that advantage, it had to close the distance quickly. Even a short burst of speed would have been enough to overtake prey. Modern predators show us how common this strategy is. The great white shark does not swim fast for long. It builds strength, waits, and accelerates when the moment arrives. Dunkleosteus likely did something similar, but with the added advantage of a jaw that drew prey inward as it opened. Scientists study modern armored fish for more clues. Some species glide through water with more speed than their weight would suggest. They use the smooth curves of their bodies to bend the flow of water around them. The same principles likely guided Dunkleosteus. In life, its armor was not a barrier, it was part of the design. It carved a path through the water rather than struggling against it. This is why scientists believe Dunkleosteus was not a slow swimmer. Every clue suggests a creature built for efficiency. The muscle scars show where power concentrated. The skull design hints at balance and motion. The hydrodynamics of armored fish suggest that weight does not always mean weakness, and the predator's role in its ecosystem speaks the same truth. A creature that ruled ancient seas needed more than strength, it needed mobility. As we picture Dunkleosteus gliding through shallow Devonian water, the missing body becomes easier to imagine. A muscular frame held close to the skull, fins that spread wide for control, a tail that delivered short, powerful thrusts. The creature moves with slow confidence until the moment of need. Then the body curves, the muscles pull, and the entire form leaps forward into motion. The ocean holds many mysteries, but some of its secrets can still be felt in the shape of bone and the memory of movement written into fossils. Dunkleosteus may never reveal its full body to us, yet in the marks left by time and in the structure that remains, we see a predator built for both speed and strength, a creature that was far more than the heavy head that survived the ages. With the rise of Dunkleosteus, the ancient oceans entered a new chapter. No longer were they filled only with quiet grazers and slow drifting creatures. The seas of the Devonian were alive with movement and tension. Every life had a place in the food web, and every species carried its own strategy for survival. Among these creatures were the ones that faced Dunkleosteus, not as rivals or equals, but as prey. One of the most common sights in these waters were the ammonites. They drifted through the ocean in vast numbers, each one protected by a shell coiled in perfect spirals. Their shells were marvels of natural engineering. Chambers inside helped them float and steer. The surface glowed with delicate patterns, yet their beauty did not promise safety. These shells were designed to defend against most hunters of the time, but the bite of Dunkleosteus was strong enough to split those spirals open. Fossils show ammonite shells with deep cuts and shattered edges. The marks follow clean curves that match the jaw plates of the predator, as if the shell had been crushed by sharp blades. These ancient scars reveal that Dunkleosteus hunted ammonites often. The shells were not obstacles, they became part of the food. Other prey moved with more freedom. Early sharks swam across the Devonian seas, their bodies flexible and fast. They were not the giants that appear millions of years later. They were smaller, more agile, and among the first creatures to refine speed as a means of survival. These sharks used stealth and sudden acceleration to avoid danger and catch their own prey. Yet even they were not beyond the reach of Dunkleosteus. Fossil evidence shows bite marks carved into the remains of early sharks. Some skeletons display deep grooves, others carry the signature of crushing force. Scientists believe that Dunkleosteus did not rely on long chases to catch them. It used short bursts of motion and the suction created when its jaws opened. Early sharks could not always escape. Their cartilage skeletons were easily damaged. Many did not survive the powerful strikes of the armored hunter. There were other cephalopods in the ancient ocean as well. They drifted through the water with tentacles fanning gently behind them. Some lived inside coiled shells. Others wore conical armor that tapered into delicate spirals. They moved with grace, using jets of water to push themselves forward. They glowed with strange colors and shifted through the currents like drifting lanterns. Yet their shells, like those of the ammonites, were no match for the jaws of Dunkleosteus. Many fossil shells from these creatures show signs of violent breaks. The fractures are sharp and uneven. They look as if the shell was caught in a vise and split cleanly. The marks tell us that Dunkleosteus did not always swallow prey whole. It often broke the shells apart to reach the soft flesh inside. The predator was patient and efficient. It learned how to open each kind of armor. Even the armored placoderms that shared the ocean were not entirely safe. Some of them wore heavy bone plating, similar to Dunkleosteus. They had evolved defense in response to growing threats, yet many of their fossils also bear bite marks. The evidence suggests that Dunkleosteus sometimes preyed on other placoderms. It was not limited by size or armor. Its jaw power and technique allowed it to tear through the protection of other species that used the same strategy for survival. These bite marks are more than curiosities. They are a record of ancient behavior. Paleontologists examine them carefully. They study the depth and angle of each break. They compare the shape of the damage to the jaw plates of Dunkleosteus. Through this work, they map the diet of an animal that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. They learn what Dunkleosteus hunted most often and how it used its strength. Some marks show clean cuts, others show crushing force. Some appear on the hard shells of ammonites, others are found on the bones of armored fish or the remains of early sharks. The range of prey reveals how versatile the predator was. It could hunt creatures with different defenses. It could break shells or slice through bone. It could swallow smaller prey whole. It could tear apart larger prey, piece by piece. The Devonian seas became a place where prey developed new strategies. Some creatures grew thicker shells, others grew more agile. The ocean was filled with shifting relationships between hunters and those who tried to escape. Yet the presence of Dunkleosteus cast a long shadow. Its bite marks are still visible today, carved into stone and fossilized bone. They speak of a predator that shaped its world through force and design. They show us how life responded to one of the earliest super predators in our planet's history. As we move through the ancient seas in our imagination, we can almost see the drama unfold. Dunkleosteus glides through the water, drawn by motion. It closes the distance in a heartbeat. The jaw opens. The suction pulls prey inward. The plates meet and shells break. And for a moment, the ocean remembers the power that ruled it. To understand how Dunkleosteus ruled its world, we must imagine its hunting, not as a chase through clear water, but as a dance shaped by patience, precision, and sudden bursts of power. The Devonian seas were not always bright or open. Light filtered through shifting clouds of plankton. Sediment drifted in quiet layers across the water. Kelp forests and reefs of ancient coral created shadows. This was not a world where predators needed long pursuits. It was a world where opportunities appeared in fleeting moments and vanished just as quickly. Dunkleosteus did not need to glide constantly in search of prey. It could wait, suspended in the water like a stone given life. Its armored head reflected ancient sunlight. Its body stayed still, guided by subtle movements of fins and tail. It could hold its position for long periods. It watched without being seen, its senses tuned to the faint signals of motion. Burst attacks became one of its greatest techniques. With a short thrust of its tail and a powerful contraction of body muscles, it could surge forward in an instant. The motion did not need to last long. A few swift strokes of the tail were enough to close the distance between Dunkleosteus and its prey. The oceans of that time were filled with creatures that did not yet understand a true predator. Many were slow or unaware. A burst of motion was all it took. This style of hunting was more than a display of power. Burst attacks worked because Dunkleosteus had evolved to use its body efficiently. Armor protected its head. Muscles stored the energy needed for sudden motion. The predator did not waste effort. Each movement was deliberate. Each strike was guided by timing. Ambush hunting allowed Dunkleosteus to take advantage of its environment. The ancient seas were rarely clear. Sediment and organic matter turned the water murky. Light scattered in faint lines rather than bright beams. In this world, Dunkleosteus did not need to be fast over distance. It only needed to remain hidden. Sometimes it moved just enough to blend into the shadows of reefs or the cloudy light of the shallows. When prey drifted near, it could strike from below or from the side, using the element of surprise. Scientists believe that Dunkleosteus also used suction to assist its attack. When the jaw opened, it did not simply separate the plates. The opening created a sudden rush of water into its mouth. This suction could draw prey inward, pulling small fish or free-swimming creatures directly toward the jaw before the bite even began. The motion is similar to that used by modern fish, but in Dunkleosteus the effect was amplified by the mechanics of the jaw. The skull, muscles, and bones formed a system that pulled the water forward like a sudden tide. Prey did not simply swim into danger. The predator drew them in. This hunting method was especially useful in the low-light conditions of the Devonian seas. Dunkleosteus did not need perfect eyesight to hunt. It only needed to sense movement and position. Even in cloudy water or dim conditions, its strategies worked. Modern predators still rely on similar methods. In murky rivers, crocodiles wait for prey to come close. In the deep ocean, many fish strike without seeing their target clearly. Dunkleosteus lived in a world where light was often filtered or scattered, and it adapted to that world perfectly. The importance of jaw acceleration cannot be overstated. Speed was not measured by how fast Dunkleosteus could swim across long distances, but by how quickly it could open and close its jaws. The mechanics of the skull provided more than crushing pressure. They allowed the jaws to achieve incredible acceleration in a fraction of a second. The opening strike was often enough to pull prey inward. The closing strike delivered the finishing force. This meant that swimming speed did not determine success. Many predators rely on endurance or pursuit. Dunkleosteus relied on a moment. It needed only to reach the edge of striking distance. Once prey came close, the jaws did the rest. The predator did not waste time or energy. It used the fastest part of its body, not to move through water, but to deliver the killing blow. The low light of the Devonian favored predators that hunted with surprise. The murky water softened movement and hid shadows. Dunkleosteus blended into this world. It glided through cloudy depths or hovered near ancient reefs. It did not need to chase prey across great distances. It let the ocean bring prey close. Then, in a heartbeat, the burst attack began. The jaws opened with a motion swift enough to pull prey forward. The strike was completed in a single movement. All of these strategies show us something subtle about Dunkleosteus. It did not survive on power alone. It combined strength with precision, stillness with sudden motion. It waited for the perfect moment, then used the most efficient method to finish the hunt. Some of its prey may never have seen the strike until it was too late. Others might have sensed the danger only as a rush of water, a sudden current, and the swift clamp of bone. In these ancient hunting strategies, we see not just a predator, but an ocean learning new rules. The seas of the Devonian were filled with shifting light and shadow. Dunkleosteus moved quietly within that world, its body shaped by the calm and the chaos of the ocean that gave rise to its power. The oceans of the Devonian were not always bright places filled with color and clear water. Light filtered through the surface in shifting waves. Sediment and plankton drifted in delicate clouds and softened everything beneath them. The deeper the water became, the more the world faded into a gentle darkness. For life to thrive in such an environment, sight alone could never be enough. A predator needed to sense the world in ways that reached beyond vision. Dunkleosteus, like many creatures of its age, lived in a realm where visibility changed from moment to moment. Some areas of the ancient seas were open and sunlit, others were shaded by cliffs of coral or the canopies of early sea plants. Even shallow waters could turn dim when storms stirred the seafloor or when plankton bloomed into thick curtains. In those shifting conditions, Dunkleosteus relied on a suite of senses that helped it navigate and feed with precision. Scientists believe that its eyes were well adapted for low light. The sockets where the eyeballs once sat are large and deeply set within the armored head. This suggests that Dunkleosteus could gather more light than many fish of its time. It could detect subtle movements in dark water and distinguish the shapes of prey even in dim conditions. The eye was a window into the environment, ready to catch the slightest shimmer of fins or shells, but the ocean does not reveal every secret through sight. When light becomes scattered and shadows blur into shapes, another sense is needed. Along the sides of modern fish is a faint line that runs from head to tail. It looks like a simple mark, yet it is one of the most powerful sensory systems in the water. Scientists call it the lateral line. It detects vibrations and water pressure changes. It listens to movement the way an ear listens to sound. Dunkleosteus likely carried a similar system along its body. The head plates may hide the remains of channels that once held sensory organs. These would have allowed the predator to sense movement through subtle shifts in the water. A swimming ammonite or a drifting cephalopod would create tiny waves that spread outward. Even if the prey was hidden in murky water or beneath a layer of sediment, Dunkleosteus would feel the disturbance. It could follow the faint echo of motion, letting the ocean guide it toward its target. This sense was especially important in the ancient seas, where light failed, sound and vibration continued. Water is a perfect messenger for movement. It carries signals quickly and clearly. Dunkleosteus could read these signals with little effort. The lateral line system allowed it to detect prey, even when its eyes saw nothing but shadows. Another sense may have played a role as well. Many modern fish and sharks use electroreception to detect electrical fields generated by other animals. Every muscle contraction and heartbeat creates a faint electrical signal. In murky water, where sight and sound offer limited guidance, these signals become important. While scientists cannot say with certainty that Dunkleosteus possessed this sense, some evidence suggests the possibility. The structure of the skull and the connections around the sensory canals hint that it may have detected electrical cues in the water. Smell is another sense that ancient predators often relied upon. Even slow currents can carry chemical signals across long distances. Early sharks used smell to track the presence of prey. Dunkleosteus likely had a similar ability. The nostril openings in the skull are positioned in a way that suggests they guided water flow carefully. A predator with powerful jaws still needed to find its target. Scent may have helped Dunkleosteus locate prey long before the strike. All of these senses contributed to a complex picture of the ocean. Dunkleosteus was not only a creature of strength, it was a creature of perception. In a world filled with moving shadows and shifting water, its senses formed a map of the environment. It knew where prey traveled. It sensed patterns in the current. It followed signals that invisible creatures left behind. These abilities shaped where Dunkleosteus lived and hunted. It was not restricted to bright open waters. It could feed in the deeper zones where sunlight weakened. It could glide through reefs where light filtered through cracks and crevices. It could move across wide stretches of the sea floor, where prey hid among ancient plants or settled into the sand. Its senses let it thrive in places where other creatures felt blind. The sensory dominance of Devonian predators was part of an evolutionary shift. Hunting no longer depended on sight alone, it depended on awareness. The ocean became a place where predators could reach into every layer of the environment. Dunkleosteus was part of that change. Its jaws gave it great power, but its senses gave it the ability to use that power wisely. In these ancient waters, each sense worked together to form a complete picture. The eyes searched for light. The lateral line listened to vibration. The nostrils tasted the water, and deeper signals, maybe even electrical ones, guided the predator through darkness. Dunkleosteus did not move through the ocean blindly. It moved through it with understanding. In the end, its senses were as important as its jaws. They shaped the world it hunted within and let it explore places where light could not follow. When we look back into the deep oceans of the Devonian, it is easy to picture Dunkleosteus as a loner. Many ancient predators appear in our minds as solitary rulers of their world, gliding through quiet water in search of prey. Yet the fossils invite another possibility. Life rarely follows only one pattern, and the ocean is filled with examples of creatures that share territories or gather when food is plentiful. Dunkleosteus itself may have lived in ways far more complex than a single path through empty seas. Fossil distribution offers our first clues. In several places where Dunkleosteus remains have been found, they do not appear alone. The bones of multiple individuals lie within the same layers of sediment. This does not guarantee that they swam together in groups. The ocean floor can gather remains over long periods. Storms and ancient currents can sweep bones into the same space. Yet in some locations, the density of fossils suggests that these predators lived close to one another. Their presence in shared rock layers hints that their territories may have overlapped. The idea of dominance hierarchies is another possibility. Modern predators sometimes gather around resources. Sharks compete for the best hunting grounds. Crocodiles circle the same rivers and guard territories. Fish that live at the top of the food chain often show complex social interactions. They do not always hunt side by side, yet they remain aware of one another. They may tolerate the presence of rivals or even form loose groups. Dunkleosteus may have behaved in similar ways, using the same waters and crossing paths more often than chance would allow. Territorial behavior would have shaped its lifestyle. The Devonian seas held reefs, shallow shelves, and deeper basins. Some areas were rich in prey, while others offered fewer resources. A predator as powerful as Dunkleosteus would not simply wander aimlessly. It likely returned to familiar places. It may have guarded certain regions where food was plentiful. Fossils found near ancient shorelines support this idea. Such regions often formed natural hunting zones. Prey gathered there in large numbers. Predators followed. When prey was abundant, Dunkleosteus may not have hunted alone. Fossils show evidence of bite marks on the bones of other Dunkleosteus individuals. Some of these marks may have been the result of competition. Others may suggest feeding frenzies, moments when the presence of food attracted several predators to the same spot. In modern oceans, sharks behave this way. A single injured animal can draw multiple sharks into a sudden frenzy. They circle, bite, and feed with little regard for one another. Dunkleosteus may have shown similar behavior when opportunity appeared. The marks of their jaws on one another's armor might not reflect battle alone. They could be the echoes of shared meals in the ancient seas. The idea of feeding frenzies suggests more than chaos. It reveals how ancient creatures responded to abundance. When a large prey animal was killed, other Dunkleosteus may have sensed the vibrations or chemical signals in the water. They may have arrived moments later. Modern apex predators share this communication through the ocean itself. The water carries every signal. A powerful bite, a sudden rush of prey, even the presence of blood creates trails that spread outward. Dunkleosteus did not need to call or communicate directly. The ocean would have delivered the message. Comparisons to modern fish help us imagine these scenes. Large groupers form dominance hierarchies and compete for territory. Great white sharks share hunting grounds and sometimes follow one another across long stretches of coastline. Orcas form cooperative groups or travel alone depending on their environment. Each strategy is shaped by the ocean's conditions. Dunkleosteus may have followed a similar pattern. It may have lived alone at times, guarding its territory and hunting in quiet waters. At other times, it may have tolerated the presence of rivals or even gathered loosely around feeding opportunities. There is also the possibility of active competition. Fossils show healed bite marks on the armored plates of some Dunkleosteus. These healed wounds suggest survival after conflict. The predators did not always kill one another. They may have tested strength or fought for territory. The scars tell us that these interactions were part of life. They show us a world where dominance mattered and where power could be displayed through battle. The evidence does not give us a single answer. Instead, it paints a picture of a predator capable of more than isolation. Dunkleosteus could have lived alone or shared space with others. It may have guarded territories or moved freely with changing conditions. It might have joined other predators when prey was plentiful. It may have fought rivals or tolerated them. Whatever the truth, the fossils remind us that ancient life often mirrors modern patterns. The same rules that guide sharks, groupers, and crocodiles today may have shaped the lives of these armored giants. The ocean creates relationships among its creatures. It brings them together and separates them. Dunkleosteus lived within that system, following rhythms we can still recognize in living waters. The Devonian seas were not empty blue expanses like the oceans we imagine today. They were rich landscapes of stone and life, layered with history and transformation. The ancient reefs that stretched across these waters were unlike the coral reefs we now know. They were built by organisms long extinct, creatures that left their own architecture behind as they grew and died. These early reefs formed towering structures of stone and shell. They created mazes and ledges where life gathered, sheltered, and fed. Instead of modern corals, these reefs were formed by sponges and ancient organisms that grew into intricate patterns. They shaped the ocean floor into a series of ridges and valleys. Sunlight filtered between their walls. The reefs became homes for small fish and cephalopods that drifted through the gaps. The surfaces of the reefs offered shelter and hunting grounds. They trapped nutrients and worked like natural barriers, guiding currents and gathering prey into tight spaces. These ancient reefs drew creatures from every direction. Prey gathered in clusters around their edges, Tiny fish swam in shimmering schools. Ammonites floated in gentle spirals, drawn to the safety of the stones. Other armored fish settled among the ledges, resting in those calm waters. The reefs created boundaries in the ocean, places where food collected and life intersected. Dunkleosteus often ruled these places. It did not need to swim across vast oceans. It could remain near these living walls, where life gathered most densely. The prey that clustered around these reefs came together for reasons beyond just safety. The atmosphere of Earth itself was changing. On land, new forests had begun to grow, roots spread through the soil and held it steady. Plants pulled minerals from the ground. Rain washed those minerals into rivers. Rivers carried them to the ocean. The chemistry of the sea shifted in response. Nutrients began to flow more freely through the water. Plankton grew in greater numbers near the surface. Small fish fed on the plankton. Larger fish fed on the small ones. Every change in chemistry created another layer in the food web. The oceans became richer and more complex. Prey grew stronger. Predators grew more specialized. Dunkleosteus lived in the center of this expanding world. The growth of forests on land also changed the atmosphere. Photosynthesis drew carbon dioxide from the air. Oxygen levels rose. The oceans responded. At different depths, oxygen could vary dramatically. Some areas were rich with it, others were poor. These changes created pockets of life and pockets of silence. Some prey gathered in the well-oxygenated waters near the surface. Others retreated to deeper zones where conditions were still stable. Dunkleosteus understood this world without knowing the science behind it. It followed the patterns of the ocean, moving into places where prey gathered and leaving the places where life could not survive. These differences in oxygen levels helped shape the food webs of the Devonian. Some creatures evolved to thrive in low oxygen environments. Others depended on the richer waters of shallow seas. Dunkleosteus lived between these zones. Its senses allowed it to find prey, regardless of the conditions. It could move through changing layers and hunt where other predators struggled to survive. The Devonian seas were also becoming more crowded. Life was evolving quickly. Sharks grew faster and more agile. Armored fish developed new defenses. Shells grew thicker. Spines appeared along the backs of prey. Dunkleosteus hunted in a world where competition became more intense. Every creature adapted to meet the challenges of survival. The reefs were not peaceful havens. They were arenas of constant change. As competition increased, the ancient food webs grew more balanced and complex. Some predators hunted primarily near the surface. Others specialized in the deeper waters or the edges of the reefs. Dunkleosteus occupied many of these roles at once. Its powerful senses and strong jaws allowed it to hunt in different environments. It could glide between shallow waters and deeper spaces where light faded. It moved through places where prey gathered in large numbers and struck when the moment was right. The growth of plant life on land also fueled greater diversity in the oceans. Rivers poured nutrients into the sea. Algae grew in thick clouds. Tiny creatures fed on the algae. Larger creatures fed on them. The food chains grew longer. Dunkleosteus sat near the top of these chains, yet it depended on all the layers beneath it. The reefs were the heart of these systems. They provided shelter and food. They guided the movement of predators and prey alike. As the Devonian progressed, these ecosystems shifted and expanded. The reefs spread along coastlines. New species appeared. Competition continued to rise. Armor, speed, and specialized hunting strategies became common. Dunkleosteus lived in a world that constantly challenged it and rewarded those who adapted. The seas it ruled were not quiet places. They were filled with change and possibility. In those ancient waters, every living thing played a part in the balance of the ecosystem. The reefs stood like monuments. The prey gathered in great numbers. The oxygen levels shifted from place to place, and Dunkleosteus moved within this world, guided by senses and instincts that helped it survive. It followed the patterns of life that grew from the land to the sea, and it lived within a world shaped by change. As Dunkleosteus moved through the Devonian oceans, it did not swim alone. Another lineage of hunters was beginning its long story beneath the same waters. These were the early sharks. They were not yet the sleek giants we know in modern seas, but they already carried the traits that would one day give them mastery of the ocean. They were nimble and flexible. Their bodies were lighter and more streamlined. Their skeletons were built from cartilage rather than bone. This made them graceful in motion, able to turn and twist with fluid precision. While Dunkleosteus embodied the power of the armored predator, early sharks were the expression of a different idea. They showed that speed and flexibility could be as valuable as strength and plating. Where the placoderms relied on protection and crushing force, the young sharks relied on agility. Their hunting strategies did not echo those of Dunkleosteus. Instead, they complemented and challenged them. One lineage pursued heavy armor and mechanical jaws. The other pursued light frames and swift motion. These two kinds of predators shared the ocean not as enemies locked in constant battle, but as different answers to the same question. The question was simple: how do you survive in a world where competition is always increasing and prey is always changing? Evolution gave both groups a place in the same waters. Sharks hunted smaller, faster prey with quick jaw snaps and sudden lunges. Dunkleosteus relied on surprise and crushing power. Their strategies did not cancel each other. They existed side by side, driven by the balance of the ecosystem. In those ancient seas, the presence of both sharks and placoderms made the food web more complex. Some regions favored the heavy hunters. Reef systems and shallow waters allowed armored fish to dominate. Their strength and bite force gave them an advantage in tight spaces. Other places favored the sharks. Open water gave them freedom to move and chase. Their light bodies let them swim more efficiently over longer distances. The ocean became a mosaic of territories where each creature found its niche. For a long time, these two groups coexisted, and neither displaced the other. This was possible because they occupied different roles in the ocean. Dunkleosteus took advantage of its jaws and armor. Sharks took advantage of their flexibility and speed. They hunted different prey and lived in different parts of the sea. The balance held steady for millions of years. Yet change was already coming. As the Devonian progressed, competition continued to rise. Prey grew smarter and faster. New species emerged. The waters were filled with shifting conditions and unpredictable currents. In this changing world, sharks began to find advantages that placoderms could not easily match. Their flexibility allowed them to pursue prey that armored hunters struggled to catch. Their cartilage skeletons let them grow larger without the burden of heavy plates. They did not need to protect their bodies as fully because their speed and reflexes became their shield. The fossils give us clues to this shift. In some ancient bone beds, placoderm remains begin to appear less frequently as the sharks become more common. The balance slowly tipped. Sharks adapted more quickly. Their bodies changed in response to the ocean's demands. They developed new forms of teeth. They refined their senses. They became masters of stealth and pursuit. Placoderms, including Dunkleosteus, remained tied to their armor and their jaw mechanics. Their strength became a limitation when the seas shifted again. One of the most striking pieces of evidence that these creatures encountered each other comes from the fossils themselves. Some placoderm bones carry the marks of shark teeth, fine scratches, deep gouges, curved indentations that match the bite of early sharks. These marks show that the two predators did meet in the water. Sometimes these encounters were likely over prey. Sometimes they may have been clashes between rivals. The marks are silent, yet they speak of moments when ancient hunters crossed paths. There are also fossils that show the reverse. Placoderm bite marks appear on the bodies of early sharks. The signature of Dunkleosteus is unmistakable in some of these wounds. This reveals that the balance between these predators was not one-sided. Dunkleosteus could overpower sharks. Sharks could challenge Dunkleosteus. The ocean was never predictable. For a time, placoderms remained dominant. The armored giants continued to rule the reefs and the shallow waters, but evolution does not pause. Over millions of years, the shark lineage continued to refine its design. The very qualities that made sharks different would eventually give them the advantage. Their flexibility, their speed, and their ability to adapt allowed them to thrive long after the placoderms vanished. In the Devonian, though, the story was far from over. This was the moment when two great hunters shared the same world. They moved through the same waters, shaped by the same forces, and challenged by the same demands. Their coexistence was not a rivalry, but a reflection of the ocean itself, a place where many strategies can succeed at once, and where change is always waiting beneath the surface. The Devonian seas did not simply give rise to predators, they gave rise to something far more dynamic. As Dunkleosteus refined its strength and sharpened its jaws, the creatures it hunted were also changing. Evolution is not a one-sided story. It does not shape only the hunter, it shapes the hunted as well. Each adaptation in one creature sparks a response in another, and soon entire ecosystems transform. The prey that once drifted slowly through the waters began to develop new defenses. Ammonites grew thicker shells, their spirals became stronger and heavier. The delicate mineral walls that protected their soft bodies were replaced by sturdier structures. These shells were no longer simple shelters, they were armor. They added weight, but they also added survival. Dunkleosteus had to work harder to crack them open. Other creatures followed the same pattern. Cephalopods that once relied on movement alone began to grow shells that curled tightly around their bodies. Some developed ridges and shapes that made it more difficult for predators to grip. The ocean was no longer a gentle world full of easy meals. It became a world where the hunted fought back with new strategies. Spines appeared along the bodies of certain fish. These spines were sharp and defensive. They warned potential predators that a bite could be painful. Some of these spines were coated in hard material, turning them into natural weapons. Others grew into patterns that deflected attacks. Armor became a language in the water. It told predators to move on or risk injury. Even the smaller fish changed. Those that had once survived by simply blending into the ocean learned another trick. They became faster, their bodies narrowed, and their fins sharpened. They learned to twist and turn in ways that made it difficult for predators to catch them. A single flick of the tail could send them darting into cracks or slipping behind rocks. Survival favored those who could flee quickly and disappear before a predator could strike. This growing complexity did not stop Dunkleosteus. It adapted in response. The predator did not remain the same while the prey evolved. Fossil evidence shows that Dunkleosteus refined its biting power. Its jaw mechanics improved. The skull plates became stronger. The lever system that powered its jaws grew more efficient. Evolution kept pace with the changes around it. Dunkleosteus learned to strike at angles that broke shells more easily. It adjusted its approach to prey that had developed spines. It used the suction of its opening jaws to pull smaller fish toward its mouth before they could escape. Each new ability allowed it to keep hunting as the ocean became more complex. The predator did not dominate the sea simply through force, it did so through adaptation. This exchange between predator and prey created something extraordinary. It became one of the first true arms races in the history of life. When prey became stronger, predators became faster. When prey developed armor, predators developed the means to break it. The ocean turned into a place where innovation unfolded with every passing age. Each creature was shaped by the presence of the other. The arms race did not always lead to greater size. Sometimes it led to cleverness. Some prey evolved patterns that made them harder to see. Others developed behaviors that helped them avoid danger. Schools of fish moved together as if they shared one mind. Their collective movement protected them from attack. The predator had to think, not just bite. The reefs that formed the heart of the Devonian seas became battlegrounds of evolution. Prey strategies spread across the ocean floor. Predator strategies followed. Everywhere life was refining itself. Dunkleosteus hunted amid this growing diversity. It did not always win. Sometimes prey escaped. Sometimes another predator arrived sooner. But the constant pressure ensured that both sides improved. This runaway escalation shaped more than the creatures themselves. It shaped the entire ecosystem. The ocean became a place of balance and tension. Every adaptation had consequences. Thick shells required more energy. Speed demanded greater agility. Spines offered protection, but slowed movement. Dunkleosteus carried the weight of its armor and jaws. It needed strong muscles to move. Everything came with a cost. Nature worked to find equilibrium between strength and speed, protection and risk. The arms race of the Devonian was not just a fight for survival. It was a dance between predator and prey. It was a cycle of change and response. Dunkleosteus stood at the center of that dance. It pushed evolution forward. It forced prey to become clever, strong, or swift. In return, the predator became more skilled, more efficient, and more refined. The ocean did not rest. It continued to transform. With each generation, new strategies arose, new body shapes appeared, new defenses and attacks emerged from the depths. The arms race did not end when Dunkleosteus swam through the water. It continued in every predator and prey that came after. In this ancient ocean, we see the early foundation of every modern predator and every modern defense. We see the beginning of a story that continues even now. The Devonian seas were the first battleground of this endless cycle, and Dunkleosteus was one of its greatest forces. In the quiet story of life, survival is never the only measure of success. Every creature must also find a way to continue its lineage, to leave behind a future in the waters where it once swam. The Devonian was a world rich with predators and prey. Yet beneath those ancient struggles was a much deeper question. How did these early armored fish create the next generation? How did Dunkleosteus, the great hunter, ensure that its story would continue? Among the placoderms, there is evidence of something remarkable. These armored fish practiced internal fertilization. Most early fish simply released eggs and sperm into the water, trusting chance and the currents to bring new life into being. Placoderms took a different path. Fossils show that males had specialized structures used to transfer sperm to the female. This was one of the earliest examples of a strategy that would later become common in sharks and many land animals. It is a hint that placoderms were not only powerful predators, but also pioneers of a more intimate form of reproduction. The proof of this ancient behavior comes from stone that once held life. In some placoderm fossils, scientists have found fossil embryos still inside the body. These were tiny, yet unmistakable. They carried the same bone patterns and armor plates as the adult, just in miniature. Their presence tells us that at least some species of placoderms gave birth to live young rather than laying eggs. Their reproduction was not a simple event, but a careful and internal process. The ocean protected the unborn inside the body of the mother until they were ready to swim freely. These fossils reveal that parenting may have begun long before the age of dinosaurs or mammals. Placoderms may have invested energy and care into their offspring, They did not leave eggs drifting in open water where predators could feast on them. They protected their young until birth. This choice suggests that Dunkleosteus might have shared a similar pattern. While we cannot be certain that it bore live young, it belonged to the same group that did. The lineage itself points toward this possibility. Internal fertilization changes the story of early fish. It suggests that relationships between individuals mattered. It implies that the placement of young was not left only to luck. Parenting may have evolved not as a complex emotional bond, but as a simple advantage. Offspring that developed inside the safety of a parent had a higher chance of survival. Those that survived passed the same traits to the next generation. Growth in placoderms also offers clues about life in the Devonian seas. Their bodies did not remain the same size throughout their lives. They grew through stages. Young placoderms likely looked like small versions of their parents, but with softer armor and smaller jaws. They developed strength over time. The ocean would have taught them how to hunt and survive. They may have remained near reefs or protected areas before venturing into deeper waters. Scientists learn about the growth of Dunkleosteus by examining the rings inside its bones. Like the rings of ancient trees, bone rings record the passing of time. Each ring marks a period of growth or change. By counting these rings, researchers estimate the age of the fish. They learn how quickly it grew and when it reached maturity. These studies suggest that Dunkleosteus may have lived for many years. Some individuals grew steadily, layer by layer, year after year. They were not short-lived creatures, nor were they quickly replaced. Life in the Devonian required resilience. Dunkleosteus needed time to grow into its strength. Its jaws, muscles, and armor developed together. The bone rings tell us that these creatures likely lived long enough to experience multiple seasons of change. They may have survived storms, food scarcity, and shifting water conditions. They may have traveled across territories and grown wiser with age. The presence of fossil embryos, bone rings, and the specialized anatomy of reproduction reveal a world where life had already begun to explore complex strategies. Parenting, growth, and longevity were not inventions of later ages. They began quietly in the armored giants of ancient seas. Dunkleosteus lived in this world as both a predator and a survivor. Its lineage carried the story of reproduction in a direction that would influence the future of marine life. The history written in fossil bone reminds us that even the fiercest hunter was once small and fragile. It began its journey inside another living being, protected by the body of a parent. It grew through stages and faced the challenges of its world. It carried that ancient story forward into the ocean that shaped it. In this way, each Dunkleosteus was both a ruler of the seas and a continuation of life's oldest promise. When the Devonian seas finally receded into memory, they left behind only fragments of what had once been a world of strange wonders. These pieces of history slept beneath layers of sediment and stone for hundreds of millions of years. Only in recent centuries did human hands uncover them, lifting the past out of rock and into the light again. Among the most important of these discoveries was a formation far from the ancient coastlines. It is known today as the Cleveland Shale. In the cliffs and riverbanks of what is now northern Ohio, paleontologists found a treasure of Devonian fossils preserved in dark layers of shale. The rock crumbled easily, revealing the bones hidden inside. Many of these remains belonged to Dunkleosteus. Their skull plates lay stacked like pieces of armor from a long-forgotten battle. Some fossils appeared perfectly preserved. Others carried signs of violence, as if the world that buried them had frozen a moment of struggle. The Cleveland Shale changed the way scientists understood Dunkleosteus. Before these discoveries, the giant armored fish had been known only from scattered fossils in other parts of the world. The shale provided an entire scene. It gave paleontologists the opportunity to study groups of individuals together, to compare sizes and shapes, and to examine the fine details of their bones. For the first time, the predator's anatomy could be studied in depth. Some of the most surprising findings came from the marks left on the fossils themselves. Deep cuts, crushed edges, and gouges told stories of how Dunkleosteus fed and fought. Many bones showed bite marks that matched the shape of Dunkleosteus' jaws. These marks were not only on the remains of prey, they appeared on the plates of other Dunkleosteus. The evidence suggested that these ancient predators sometimes fed on their own kind. Cannibalism, while startling to imagine, fit the world they lived in. When prey became scarce, or when rivals fought over territory, the bodies of other placoderms could become food. The bite marks revealed more than conflict. They showed how Dunkleosteus attacked and tore apart its meals. Some marks left clean slices, the kind made by sharp jaw edges. Others were the result of crushing pressure. The plates of shellfish and other armored fish were often shattered. Scientists compared the patterns of damage to understand how the predator positioned its prey. They saw that Dunkleosteus did not simply bite once, it often clamped down and twisted. It used leverage and force. Its jaws did not only cut, they broke and crushed. The bone plates themselves added to the story. When scientists examined the minerals in the plates, they learned how the armor formed during the fish's life. The plates were made of layers of bone and dentin, the same hard material found in teeth. These minerals strengthened the armor and allowed it to withstand blows. The structure formed a balance between protection and weight. It let Dunkleosteus move with power while guarding its vulnerable head. The mineral composition also gave clues about the ocean. Bones absorb elements from the water. The chemical signature inside those plates is like a record of where the fish lived. By studying the elements preserved in the bones, scientists learned about the water conditions of the Devonian. They saw that certain parts of the ocean had higher levels of specific minerals. This helped them understand how deep the water was and how currents carried nutrients. Chemical traces showed differences between individuals. Some Dunkleosteus spent time in deeper waters. Others lived closer to the ancient shorelines. These clues revealed the predator's range and movement. The Cleveland Shale did not simply show that Dunkleosteus existed, it showed how it lived. Even the shale itself told a story. The rock layers revealed periods when oxygen levels changed. Some layers formed in calm, shallow water, others formed in deeper, low oxygen environments. The shale preserved the history of the Devonian seas, marking the changes that took place over thousands of years. It showed when life thrived and when it struggled. The fossils inside those layers offered a glimpse into the final days of Dunkleosteus, when the environment began to shift toward collapse. As scientists continued to study the fossils, they discovered more subtle details. The growth rings in the bones suggested how long the fish lived. The chemical signatures showed what they ate. The bite marks revealed how they hunted and fought. Each discovery deepened our understanding of the Devonian world. Today, the Cleveland Shale remains one of the most important windows into the past. It connects the rocks beneath our feet to a time when armored giants swam through ancient seas. It reminds us that the fossils we uncover are more than broken bones. They are messages from the deep, carrying fragments of life across millions of years. They tell the story of Dunkleosteus not as a myth, but as a creature that once existed in water filled with prey and predators, in a world that changed and faded long before we arrived. The Devonian had been a time of abundance, warm, shallow seas, forests rising on land, and a growing web of life that reached from the surface of the water to its shadowed depths. But Earth is never still for long. Even the most thriving worlds change, and sometimes those changes arrive slowly and quietly, like a shifting tide. Other times they sweep across the planet in great, unpredictable waves. Near the end of the Devonian, The climate began to swing between cooling and warming again and again. These shifts did not follow a simple pattern. Temperatures dropped for long periods, then rose sharply, only to fall once more. The world's climate drifted between extremes. The seas that had once been bathed in stable warmth now experienced seasons of cold that interrupted the rhythm of life. Creatures that had evolved in steady conditions now faced the challenge of unpredictability. Along the coastlines, these changes transformed entire habitats. The shallow bays and reef fringes that had once been rich with prey began to shrink. As sea levels rose and fell, the shape of the coastline changed. Shores moved, sheltered waters vanished. The places where Dunkleosteus had once found easy hunting grounds became unstable. Sediment washed into the sea as landscapes changed. Mud and silt clouded the water. Habitats that had taken millions of years to form were erased in far less time. The reef systems began to fail as a result. The early reefs built by ancient organisms long extinct today were especially sensitive to changes in temperature and water chemistry. When the climate shifted too quickly, the reef builders could not recover. One by one, the great reef structures of the Devonian declined. Some collapsed into rubble, others simply stopped growing. Without these reefs, the food webs that depended on them became weaker. The safe havens for small fish and cephalopods disappeared. Species that relied on the reefs for shelter lost their protection. In the deeper waters, the changes continued. Oxygen levels in the ocean began to drop. Scientists believe that warming and cooling cycles changed the circulation of the water. As currents weakened or shifted, less oxygen reached the depths. Whole regions of the sea became what researchers call dead zones, places where little could survive. The oceans grew patchy and unpredictable. Some areas still held life, others became quiet and empty. For animals near the top of the food chain, these changes were especially dangerous. Apex predators rely on stability. They depend on ecosystems that support countless smaller species. When the smaller creatures vanish, the predator has no choice but to move or starve. Dunkleosteus had lived in a world that once offered abundant prey and familiar hunting grounds. Now it found itself in a world where those resources were disappearing. Environmental instability tests even the strongest creatures. Dunkleosteus was fierce and adaptable, but no predator can escape the collapse of its world. When reefs decline, prey vanishes. When oxygen falls, the water becomes harder to inhabit. Changes in temperature force fish to migrate or die. The ocean was no longer the balanced place it had once been. The food web became fractured. The once thriving ecosystems began to unravel. This did not happen in a single moment. It happened in stages, each one changing the ocean a little more. At first, Dunkleosteus may have carried on as before. It moved through waters that were still filled with prey. The reefs had not yet disappeared entirely, but each generation faced a sea that was slightly different. Fewer prey, colder waters, more competition for what remained. The apex hunter of the Devonian could not change fast enough to match the shifting world. These changes also encouraged other predators to rise. Early sharks continued to grow more flexible and adaptable. They could travel farther to find new habitats. They could survive in waters that Dunkleosteus could not fully exploit. As the environment crumbled, the old strategies of armor and crushing jaws became less effective. Dunkleosteus was a creature built for a world that was slowly fading away. The collapse of the Devonian was not a single disaster. It was a long sequence of changes that weakened life from many directions. Cooling and warming reshaped the climate. Coastlines shifted and erased habitats. The reefs disappeared. Oxygen dropped in the depths. The seas became unstable. For millions of years, Dunkleosteus had ruled the oceans. But even the greatest predator is vulnerable when the foundations of its world begin to fall apart. In the end, the collapse was not just about one species, it was about the entire ocean system that had supported life for so long. The Devonian began with growth and innovation. It ended in uncertainty, with the seas slowly turning into a place where many could no longer survive. The ocean that Dunkleosteus once ruled was becoming something else. The balance that had shaped its life was slipping away, carried by the slow and powerful hand of a changing earth. The Gurthone that had once been a cradle of innovation and abundance began to change in ways that were both subtle and devastating. The Devonian world did not disappear in a single moment. It was undone by a series of events that came one after another, like slow and silent waves washing across the earth. Scientists now call these events extinction pulses. Each one removed part of the delicate web of life. Each one weakened the systems that had supported creatures like Dunkleosteus. The first pulses struck quietly. Ocean temperatures shifted. The chemistry of the water changed. Some species vanished from shallow waters. Others disappeared from the deeper zones, where oxygen had once been plentiful. These losses were like threads unraveling in a tapestry. At first, the overall picture remained. The reefs continued to grow. The predators continued to hunt. The ocean seemed resilient. But life was already beginning to bend beneath the weight of change. Over time, the extinction pulses became stronger. The oceans began to lose oxygen. Scientists describe these events with the word anoxic. It means that the water could no longer carry the oxygen needed to sustain life. Entire stretches of the sea became what we now call dead zones. These were areas where only the hardiest bacterial life could survive. Fish could not breathe there. Plants could not grow. The movements of the ocean shifted the boundaries of these dead zones. They spread like shadows through the water. Once oxygen began to vanish, the collapse of food chains followed. The smallest organisms were the first to disappear. Plankton populations fell. Without plankton, many of the small fish that fed on them starved. Without those small fish, the larger predators struggled. Dunkleosteus and other apex hunters depended on the entire food chain beneath them. When the base of that chain crumbled, their power became meaningless. Top predators are always the most vulnerable in times of collapse. They depend on stability. They require abundant prey and carefully balanced ecosystems. When the ocean could no longer support the smaller creatures, the larger predators died first. They could not adapt quickly enough. The traits that had once made them rulers of the seas, their strength and size, became burdens in a world that was unraveling. A giant cannot find enough to eat when the world shrinks around it. As the extinction pulses continued, the reefs that had been the heart of Devonian life disappeared. They were not destroyed in a moment. They faded. Reef builders died. The structures stopped growing. Sediments settled over them. What had once been vibrant ecosystems turned into still and lifeless stone. The decline of the reefs was both a sign and a cause of the extinction. When the reefs fell silent, so did the ocean around them. Scientists have learned about the late Devonian extinction not only by studying fossils, but also by studying the rocks themselves. Layers of black shale mark the moments when the seas turned anoxic. These rocks formed in oxygen-poor water. They hold organic material that settled at the bottom of ancient basins and remained untouched by decay. In those black layers, the past is written in the language of chemistry. The rocks contain the remains of organisms trapped in the moment of collapse. They record the chemical signature of dying oceans. These shale layers appear in many places around the world. They form a geological boundary that tells us the story of change. In some regions, they form thick bands of dark stone. In others, they are thin and delicate. But everywhere they appear, they show a record of loss. They show the rise of anoxic water and the disappearance of life. The late Devonian extinction was not a single catastrophe. It was a long and complex event that unfolded over millions of years. It came in waves. It reshaped the oceans and the land. It changed the future of life on Earth. Some species survived and slowly recovered. Others vanished forever. Dunkleosteus was among those that did not survive the final waves. It lived long enough to see the collapse begin. It adapted as long as it could. But when the last extinction pulse arrived, the world it had mastered was gone. The sea that once held forests of coral like stone and forests of ancient plants on land became quieter. The last of the placoderms disappeared. New creatures rose in the silence that followed. Sharks, which had coexisted with Dunkleosteus, found new places to thrive. They carried the legacy of the ocean's long story into the ages that followed. The black shale layers remain as reminders. They are the pages in Earth's archive that tell us what the world endured. They speak of a time when the oceans changed and life changed with them. When the Devonian died, it left behind a different planet. The world that had given rise to Dunkleosteus was gone, and the next chapter of Earth's history was ready to begin. The story of Dunkleosteus does not end in a single dramatic moment. It ends as many stories in nature do, slowly and almost imperceptibly, carried by currents of change that begin far away from the creature itself. The great armored predator had weathered countless challenges. It had hunted through murky water and shifting reefs. It had survived battles and feeding frenzies. It had lived through the world's first great arms race. Yet something deeper than competition or strength now began to work against it. As the late Devonian extinction unfolded, prey became scarce. The rich food webs that had once supported Dunkleosteus were unraveling piece by piece. The reefs that had been gathering places for prey were gone. Many of the smaller fish and shelled animals had vanished. The ammonites, cephalopods, and armored placoderms that once filled the sea in great numbers now struggled to survive or disappeared entirely. Even the swift early sharks that had shared the waters with Dunkleosteus were forced to change their habits. The ocean was no longer abundant. For a predator as specialized as Dunkleosteus, this scarcity was more than a challenge. It was a shifting foundation. The predator needed a large supply of food to sustain its heavy body and powerful muscles. It had evolved in a time of plenty. It was built for a world where prey was never too far away. When that world faded, the traits that once made it strong became obstacles. Power becomes a burden when there is nothing left to use it upon. Some predators adapt by changing their diet or their hunting strategies. They adjust their behavior in response to new environments. Dunkleosteus faced a different reality. Its body was shaped for crushing, slicing, and breaking heavily armored prey. These were traits honed over millions of years. They could not shift quickly. The predator could not suddenly become a hunter of tiny fish or plankton. Its size, its jaws, its entire form demanded something more substantial. In a changing sea, it could not adjust with the speed that was required. While Dunkleosteus faced the burden of its own design, other creatures found ways to thrive. Early sharks, for instance, were more resilient. Their lighter bodies demanded less energy. Their flexible skeletons let them travel farther in search of food. Their jaws could adapt to a variety of prey. As the ocean changed, sharks were not trapped by specialization. They could shift their behavior and move into new regions. They found pockets of oxygen-rich water and followed the remaining prey into deeper or more distant areas. Competition did not end with the collapse of the reefs. It shifted and grew more intense. Sharks became more than neighbors in the ancient seas. They became competitors for the few resources that were left. Where reefs once created separate habitats for predators, the shrinking ocean forced creatures into shared waters. In those places, the sharks had the advantage. Their agility, endurance, and diverse diet made them better suited to these difficult times. The chemistry of the ocean continued to change. The water grew stranger and less predictable. Oxygen levels shifted, minerals changed. The currents that once carried nutrients weakened. The calm, fertile seas that had nourished so many species were disappearing. Dunkleosteus had evolved to live in a stable world. It needed reliable conditions and abundant resources. When those conditions vanished, there was little room left for the ancient predator. Paleontologists have traced this decline through the fossils. The record shows fewer and fewer Dunkleosteus remains in the later layers of Devonian rock. The giant armored skulls that were once common become rare. Then they disappear. This fading of fossils marks the end of a lineage that once ruled the seas. The final appearance of Dunkleosteus is not marked by a single dramatic change. It is marked by absence. Some fossils hint at the last days. The skull plates of the final generations show signs of growth and wear. They tell us that the last Dunkleosteus lived long enough to grow large. They hunted as long as prey remained. They endured the collapse of their world for as long as they could. But in the layers that follow, they are gone. The oceans changed into a place where Dunkleosteus could not follow. Other creatures moved into the space they left behind. Sharks continued to rise, shaping the future of the seas. New lineages of fish evolved to fill the gaps in the food web. Life did not end with the fall of Dunkleosteus, it simply changed course. The ancient predator remained only in fossils, in plates preserved by stone and time. The story of Dunkleosteus ends quietly. It is a reminder that even the greatest hunters depend on the balance of their world. They do not stand apart from it, they are shaped by it. The fall of Dunkleosteus was not a failure of strength. It was the story of a world moving forward, leaving behind the creatures that once defined it. When Dunkleosteus disappeared from the oceans, it left behind more than empty waters. It left an absence that echoed through every corner of the Devonian seas. The great predator had once shaped the world around it, through power and presence. Its fall did not simply remove a single species, it opened an opportunity. It created a wide and silent space where new hunters could rise. Among the survivors of the late Devonian extinction were the early sharks. They were not the largest or the most heavily armored creatures. They did not carry thick bone plates or the crushing jaws that had defined placoderms. Yet these differences became their strengths. While the great armored fish struggled under the burden of their design, sharks thrived as the ocean changed. Sharks outlasted placoderms because they were flexible. Their bodies were made of cartilage rather than bone. This gave them a lighter frame that demanded less energy. They could travel farther with fewer resources. They could search for food even when prey became scarce. Their skeletons did not weigh them down. Their movement was smoother and more adaptable. When the seas became unpredictable, sharks could respond. Evolution had given placoderms a strategy of rigidity. Armor protected them, but it also confined them. Their bodies were built for a world that no longer existed. The world had rewarded strength and stability. It had rewarded heavy plating and powerful jaws. But when the environment shifted, these same traits became liabilities. Placoderms could not change quickly enough. Their entire lineage faded like a shadow at dusk. Sharks did the opposite. Their flexibility was not only physical, it was evolutionary. They could grow larger or smaller depending on the environment. They could develop new kinds of teeth. They could refine their senses. As the food chains reshaped themselves, the sharks reshaped themselves too. Some became swift and slender, others grew thick and strong. They experimented with new forms in a world where innovation meant survival. When Dunkleosteus disappeared, an ecological vacuum opened in the oceans. An apex predator had vanished. The top of the food chain became an empty space that needed to be filled. Nature rarely leaves such spaces empty for long. Sharks moved into this role gradually, generation by generation. They filled the niches that placoderms once held. They hunted in the waters that Dunkleosteus once ruled. They followed prey into new regions and adapted to new habitats. As sharks began to dominate the oceans, they diversified rapidly. Some species hunted near the surface, where sunlight filtered into the water. Others roamed the deeper zones where the world was dim and quiet. Their teeth became tools suited for every kind of prey. Some were shaped for slicing flesh, others were shaped for crushing shells. Their senses improved. They learned to track prey through motion and scent. The ocean became their territory. They crossed distances with ease and filled the waters with new life. This rise of sharks did more than replace the placoderms. It changed the design of predators forever. The age of armor had ended. The age of agility had begun. From this moment onward, many of the greatest hunters would follow the same path. They would rely on speed rather than weight. They would use flexibility rather than rigid plates. They would carry their strength not in a thick shell, but in senses and motion. In the silence that followed the extinction pulses, new ecosystems slowly formed. Where reefs had collapsed, new communities of life began to grow. Where prey had vanished, new species emerged. It took millions of years, but the ocean did not stay empty. Life returned to the sea and found new balance. Throughout this renewal, sharks remained. They did not fade as the placoderms had. They adapted and endured. This permanent shift in predator design can still be seen in today's oceans. The great white shark, the hammerhead, the swift mako, all carry the ancient legacy of those first survivors. Their bodies are built for motion and precision. Their jaws are tools of versatility. Their senses are tuned to the pulse of the sea. They are children of the world that followed Dunkleosteus, shaped by evolution in a way that honored the past while preparing for the future. Yet the memory of placoderms remains within the ocean's story. They were the first to test the idea of armor and crushing power. They were the first to explore the design of a super predator. And when their time passed, the ocean did not simply erase them, it learned from them. It took their legacy and transformed it. The rise of sharks was not a replacement. It was a continuation of the same question that has guided life since the beginning. How do creatures survive when the world changes? How do they adapt when the environment shifts? Sharks answered this question with flexibility, with movement, with innovation. They stepped into a world left vacant by the fall of Dunkleosteus and carried the story of evolution forward. In the quiet aftermath of extinction, a new chapter began beneath the waves, and the oceans moved into a different age. The story of Dunkleosteus holds a quiet lesson about life on Earth. It is a reminder that every creature is shaped by the forces of change. The armored giant did not rise only because it was strong. It rose because the seas demanded innovation. The oceans of the Devonian were not gentle or simple. They were worlds of new life, new environments, and new challenges. In these shifting waters, evolution was not a slow and peaceful process. It was a constant conversation between the environment and the creatures that lived within it. Innovation often begins when creatures are pushed to their limits. In the early Devonian seas, food was plentiful, but few predators were capable of hunting efficiently. Early fish were soft and slow. Prey moved gently through the water. The ocean invited something new to appear. Dunkleosteus was one answer to that invitation. It developed powerful jaws, heavy armor, and a body that could withstand the dangers of the time. It was not simply built to survive, it was built to dominate. Predation shapes ecosystems in ways that ripple through every level of life. When Dunkleosteus hunted, it did not only change the fate of the creatures it ate, it changed the behavior of the entire ocean. Smaller fish evolved thicker shells and faster speeds. Some species migrated into different waters to escape. Others began to grow defenses of their own. The presence of a single apex predator rearranged the balance between species. It created new challenges and opportunities, and with each generation, creatures responded. This pattern continued long after Dunkleosteus disappeared. The evolution of predators did not stop. In later ages, different creatures found similar answers to old problems. Sharks sharpened their speed and developed sophisticated senses. Crocodiles evolved armor and crushing jaws. Even on land, when large predators emerged, they often repeated this design. They grew strong skulls and powerful muscles. They developed tools to grasp or slice, just as Dunkleosteus had. Scientists call this convergent evolution. It means that different species, separated by millions of years, find the same solutions to similar challenges. These creatures are not related. They simply face the same question. How does a predator survive, adapt, and overcome the limits of its environment? In the long story of life, the details change, but the patterns return. Dunkleosteus was one of the first to show this. It revealed how far nature could push the idea of a predator. But the story of Dunkleosteus also shows the limits of certain designs. Heavy armor can protect a creature, but it comes at a cost. It weighs down the body. It consumes energy. It demands a constant supply of food and strength. When the seas were rich and stable, these costs were manageable. Dunkleosteus thrived. But when the world shifted and resources became scarce, the armor that once guarded became a burden. Nature often abandons heavy armor for this reason. It works until the environment changes. Then it becomes a challenge rather than a benefit. Over time, evolution favored flexibility. The predators that came after Dunkleosteus were not shaped like armored tanks. They were lighter and quicker. They relied on movement rather than plating. They used speed and agility to pursue prey. This shift can still be seen in the oceans today. Most large marine predators do not wear shells. They do not carry the heavy plates their ancient ancestors once used. They move through open water with sleek bodies and refined senses. They are shaped not for one world, but for many possible worlds. Yet Dunkleosteus is not a failed design. It is an answer to a moment that required it. It reveals how evolution works, not toward perfection, but toward usefulness. When the ocean demanded strength, Dunkleosteus delivered. When the ocean shifted, nature found a new path. Evolution is not about the strongest creature surviving forever. It is about the strongest creature surviving in one moment, in one environment, until something changes. The legacy of Dunkleosteus is more than its fossils or the marks it left on the bones of its prey. It is a reflection of how life responds to pressure. When the world shifts, species change with it. Some adapt, some fade, some, like Dunkleosteus, leave their story written in stone. For a time, the armored fish was the perfect answer to the question of survival. It reshaped the sea and inspired new forms of life. It started an arms race that continued long after it was gone. The story of Dunkleosteus is a reminder that evolution is always moving. It finds new solutions. It revisits old ones. It never stops building and rebuilding the world. For all the ancient power of Dunkleosteus, for all its dominance in the Devonian seas, the creature's story arrives in our time with a strange absence at its center. When we speak of Dunkleosteus, we picture the massive armored head with its plates of bone. We picture jaws that worked like a complex machine. Yet everything behind that formidable skull seems to have slipped away. The tail, the spine, the fins, and the body have vanished, leaving only fragments of what once existed. This disappearance is not an accident. It is a quiet lesson in how bones tell stories and how often they fail to survive the long passage of time. Dunkleosteus was part of a group of ancient fish known as placoderms. Their front halves were protected by thick bone. The rest of their skeleton was made of cartilage, which is the same flexible material found in the bodies of modern sharks. Cartilage is fragile. It breaks down easily. It dissolves in the shifting sands of ancient seas. It rarely fossilizes unless the conditions are perfect. Over millions of years, the sediments that covered Dunkleosteus protected the armored skull, but not the softer parts of the body. This is why almost every Dunkleosteus fossil we have discovered is a head. Sometimes the entire head is preserved, with plates that lock together like puzzle pieces. Sometimes only the jaw is present. The rest has disappeared into the deep past. Yet this absence does not stop scientists. It only invites the imagination of paleontologists to step forward, guided by evidence rather than guesswork. To understand the missing body, researchers looked to related species. There were other placoderms that left more complete skeletons. These relatives show body shapes that blend power and mobility. They reveal fins for steering through the water and tails for sudden bursts of speed. Some had slender bodies that tapered smoothly toward the back. Others had more muscular forms, shaped for powerful swimming. These comparisons allow scientists to build a picture of Dunkleosteus. It was likely not a slow or clumsy fish. Its body probably continued the strength and precision of the head. There are several competing reconstructions. In museums and scientific illustrations, Dunkleosteus appears in different forms. Some models show a bulky body, shaped like a modern grouper, with heavy muscles to support strong movement. Others imagine a more streamlined figure, suggesting speed and agility. A few reconstructions even give the creature a shark-like form, with a pointed tail and sleek fins. Each design is based on clues left by the fossils and by the related species that preserve the missing information. These differences are not disagreements, they are a natural part of science. When evidence is partial, interpretations grow and shift. The missing body encourages new questions. What shape allowed Dunkleosteus to hunt with such force? How did its muscles connect to the armored plates of its skull? What kind of swimmer was it in the ancient seas? Each possibility offers a different glimpse of the creature's life. Modern technology has begun to reach into this mystery. High-resolution scans can reveal tiny details on the fossil plates where muscles once anchored. These subtle marks indicate the strength of the jaw and the movement of the skull. Computer models can recreate how the jaws opened and closed. They simulate the forces involved in each bite. Some researchers even use three-dimensional printing to build replicas of the skull and jaw. They test these replicas in water to see how the fish might have moved. Other scientists study chemical signatures in the fossils, searching for hints about the body's structure and the environments it passed through. New tools continue to appear. Artificial intelligence models can compare thousands of fossils, identifying patterns that human eyes might miss. Digital reconstructions can turn fragments of bone into complete structures. Each innovation brings us closer to understanding the body that disappeared so long ago. One day, a discovery may reveal a rare fossil that preserves the missing cartilage. Such a fossil would transform our understanding of Dunkleosteus. The absence of the body remains one of paleontology's biggest puzzles, not because the pieces are gone, but because the pieces that remain are so powerful, so compelling, that they invite the mind to fill the rest. The armored skull speaks loudly about the creature's strength and ancient life. It gives us a clear image of its role in the oceans. It preserves the memory of a predator that once shaped the world. Yet the mystery remains. It reminds us that fossils are fragments of stories. They are echoes rather than complete voices. They challenge us to imagine the world that once existed and to search for answers hidden in stone. The missing body of Dunkleosteus is a symbol of how much we know and how much we still do not know. It is a gentle reminder that even the greatest creatures can leave behind only parts of themselves, waiting for us to read the rest in the language of the earth. Even though Dunkleosteus lived more than 360 million years ago, it still speaks to us through the language of stone. The fossils may be incomplete, and the body may be gone, yet the clues that remain are far from silent. Scientists today use tools that would have been unimaginable only a century ago. They listen to these ancient fragments not by holding them to the light, but by seeing inside them, through them, and beyond them. One of the most powerful tools begins by treating the fossil plates as if they were transparent. Scientists use CT scans to explore every ridge and groove without damaging the fossil. These scans send thin slices of light and energy through the ancient bone. The result is a detailed three-dimensional map of the skull. This map reveals tiny textures, anchoring points for muscles, and the places where bone once connected to cartilage. It shows how the plates interlocked and how they bore the strain of movement and bite. CT scans do more than show surface details. They reveal the thickness and density of the fossil plates. They expose hidden fractures and the inner structure of the bone. This helps scientists understand how strong the skull was and how the animal resisted the forces of impact. In a way, these scans give the fossil a second life. They let us peer beneath the surface and discover the pieces of anatomy that once allowed Dunkleosteus to strike with such power. From these scanned images, researchers build digital models of the jaws. The models are detailed and interactive. They can be rotated, moved, and tested in virtual space. Scientists can simulate how the jaws opened and closed. They can see how far the lower jaw swung and how the upper plates pivoted. They can test the angles of attack and the speed of each movement. These models transform bone into motion. They recreate the ancient biomechanics that once defined a predator. Once the jaw is modeled, it becomes possible to reverse engineer the physics of the bite. Researchers measure the leverage points. They calculate the force that would have been generated by each muscle. They test how quickly the jaws could accelerate and how hard the plates would strike when they closed. They can even estimate the pressure at the tip of the bite. Some studies suggest that Dunkleosteus could bite with a force measured in tons. This force did not come only from muscle, it came from the shape of the skull and the way the bones fit together. The jaws acted like a lever, turning small amounts of motion into immense power. To better understand the creature, scientists compare the skull with modern predators. They study sharks that use speed to catch their prey. They examine crocodiles that use brute strength. They observe groupers and pikefish, which use quick bursts of motion. These comparisons help researchers see what Dunkleosteus might have done. The similarities show patterns in evolution. They reveal how nature returns to ideas that work, even across millions of years. Sometimes the best comparisons come from unexpected creatures. The way Dunkleosteus closed its jaws has been likened to the snapping motion of some fast-moving fish today. The timing of the strike is similar to the way certain modern predators gulp water to create suction. These analogs do not answer every question, but they help scientists imagine how the animal hunted. They offer a living reference in the modern ocean. Technology also allows scientists to simulate the ancient environment. They can test how Dunkleosteus would have moved in water. They model the currents and pressures of the ancient seas. They study how the armored plates would have affected the creature's buoyancy. Each simulation reveals new pieces of the puzzle. It brings the past into sharper focus and turns fragmentary fossils into living pictures. Yet there are challenges that remain. The missing body is the most obvious. Without the full skeleton, scientists must work carefully. Every conclusion must be tested and tested again. Each new fossil adds a piece, but the picture is still incomplete. Paleontologists must balance imagination with evidence. They must consider alternative forms and avoid assuming too much. The gaps in the record are a constant reminder of the limits of knowledge. There is another challenge, too. The fossils that have survived are not always perfect. Some are cracked or broken. Some have been changed by minerals and pressure. They are shaped by millions of years of burial. Extracting the truth from them requires patience and care. Scientists clean and prepare the bones, preserving as much detail as possible. They handle each piece as if it were a fragile memory. They know that every mark and line holds information. Through all of this work, the story of Dunkleosteus becomes clearer. Scientists uncover the mechanics of the jaw. They reveal the strengths of the skull. They reconstruct the way the fish hunted and moved. It is not only a scientific journey, it is a rediscovery of a world that has long since disappeared, made visible again by the tools and knowledge of today. The fossils speak in their own quiet way, and through careful study, scientists learn to hear them. The story of Dunkleosteus does not belong only to the Devonian seas or to the fossil beds where its armored skulls lie buried in stone. It has also taken root in our cultural imagination. It appears in paintings and documentaries. It surges across the internet in enormous viral illustrations. It swims through conversations about ancient life, side by side with the most famous dinosaurs. Even today, more than 300 million years after it vanished, Dunkleosteus continues to inspire a curious sense of awe. There is something deeply compelling about ancient apex predators. They seem to carry a distant memory of survival and power. They remind us of a time when nature was still experimenting, when the first great hunters were taking shape. These creatures embody the idea of evolution at full strength, working with possibility rather than certainty. People are drawn to these old predators because they invite us to imagine a world that does not resemble our own, yet still feels connected to it. There is fascination in wondering how life navigated such unfamiliar oceans. Dunkleosteus is especially magnetic because it defies expectations. When people first see it, they often imagine a creature the size of a submarine. Some believe it reached lengths far greater than it actually did. Illustrations sometimes stretch its size into exaggeration, showing it as a titan dwarfing every other creature around it. These misconceptions travel quickly across social media. They become part of the myth rather than the truth. Another popular misconception is that Dunkleosteus had long, sharp teeth. Many drawings show rows of jagged fangs, like those of a modern shark. The reality is stranger and more impressive. Dunkleosteus did not need teeth. Its armored jaw plates formed blades that sharpened themselves through use. Yet something about the image of giant teeth continues to appeal to the imagination. It is as if people find comfort in familiar symbols of danger. Teeth are easy to understand. Bone plates that slice like a weapon feel mysterious, and mystery pulls the mind deeper. Part of its modern identity has been shaped by documentaries and videos that dramatize the ancient seas. In some recreations, Dunkleosteus charges forward like a terrifying monster, moving faster than any real animal of its size likely could. The camera follows it like a character in a story. The water churns, the music swells. These images can be more dramatic than scientific, yet they contribute to the legend. They help audiences picture a time that would otherwise be too distant to imagine. What makes Dunkleosteus feel more monstrous than a dinosaur is not just its power, it is the world it lived in. Dinosaurs walked across landscapes that look familiar to us. There were forests and rivers. The sky was the same sky. But Dunkleosteus belonged to a world that seems almost alien. It swam through seas where the first forests were only just forming. The atmosphere was different. The reefs were strange. Life had not yet become the world we know. The Devonian seas feel like a dream time. They are remote and quiet. They are filled with creatures that seem half-formed, as if evolution were still sketching the early outlines of what would come later. Dunkleosteus was one of the first to take on the role of a true super predator. Its armor and its bite resemble tools forged at the dawn of biological innovation. The creature appears more like a myth from the deep than simply an animal. Yet despite the dramatic images and stories, the real power of Dunkleosteus in popular imagination may come from something softer. It comes from the sense of looking through a window into deep time. It comes from knowing that the ocean once held creatures that no longer exist. The idea that something so strange and so powerful could rise and fall long before humans existed invites reflection. It awakens curiosity about the history written beneath our feet and engraved in stone. In this way, Dunkleosteus does not only stir excitement, it stirs emotion. It becomes a symbol of how small our moment is in the larger story of Earth. People may not realize it, but when they share images of the armored fish or watch ancient ocean scenes unfold on a screen, they are connecting with a distant chapter of our planet's journey. Deep time predators carry a quiet resonance. They allow us to ask questions about beginnings rather than endings. They give shape to the ancient worlds that seem hidden inside the rock and sand. They remind us that life has been reinventing itself again and again. And somewhere in that long river of time, Dunkleosteus remains a shimmering echo, still alive in imagination, even though it has been gone for ages. Even though Dunkleosteus vanished long before forests grew tall or birds crossed the sky, the idea of an apex predator did not disappear with it. The seas and rivers of our world still carry echoes of its legacy. When we look at the oceans today, when we watch the largest hunters glide through the water, we see patterns that mirror the ancient Devonian seas. The shape of dominance has changed, but the role remains familiar. In the cold oceans of the present day, orcas patrol in groups with a quiet confidence. They are among the most intelligent predators ever to exist in water. Their strength does not come only from their teeth or their size. It comes from their ability to think and to communicate. They use coordinated strategies to hunt prey that would otherwise escape. Sometimes they chase a single fish in tight spirals. Sometimes they work together to create waves that push seals from ice. These behaviors are reminders that power in nature can grow from cooperation. Dunkleosteus lived long before the evolution of complex social behavior. Yet the presence of orcas invites us to reflect on how far predation has come. The oceans that once echoed with the thunder of armored jaws now carry hunters that plan and learn. Where Dunkleosteus relied on mechanical strength and design, orcas use knowledge and flexibility. Both strategies achieve the same result. They dominate their environments and shape the fate of the animals around them. Not far behind the orca in the story of modern predators is the great white shark. Its presence feels like a direct connection to the ancient seas. With its powerful body and keen senses, the great white represents speed and efficiency. Its design is not weighed down by armor. It is streamlined, shaped by millions of years of evolution. It carries lessons similar to those that led the rise of sharks after the fall of Dunkleosteus. Movement is its strength. Precision is its weapon. A great white hunts by sensing the smallest movements in the water. It can detect scents from far away. It can feel the electric fields created by living bodies. These are abilities that took shape in the long lineage that followed the ancient placoderms. Dunkleosteus once reshaped the ocean by pure force. The great white reshapes it by fusing strength with sensitivity. Both reveal different answers to the same evolutionary challenge. Other predators take on different forms. In the warmer seas, giant groupers move slowly at first glance, but their size hides surprising power. They do not chase prey in long sprints. They wait. They strike when the moment is perfect. They use stealth and patience. Their jaws open with sudden force, creating suction that pulls prey into darkness. There is something almost ancient in this method. It is a quiet echo of the suction-based strike Dunkleosteus may have used. The details have changed, but the idea has not. The ocean rewards creatures that can strike with precision. On land and in freshwater, Nile crocodiles carry another reflection of the ancient world. They are armored, not with bone plates like the placoderms, but with thick scales. They move with slow, confident care. They can wait for hours in silence. When they attack, it is sudden and overwhelming. Their jaws snap closed with force that crushes bone. They do not need speed to hunt. They rely on surprise. They use patience as a weapon. These modern predators remind us that dominance takes many forms. Some rely on intelligence, some rely on strength, some use stealth or speed, some use cooperation. The ancient seas that shaped Dunkleosteus have been replaced by new environments, yet the patterns continue. Life keeps reinventing the idea of a hunter. There is a deeper lesson in these comparisons. Apex predators hold power, but their strength depends on the world around them. Orcas rely on stable food chains. Great whites need healthy oceans. Groupers depend on balanced reefs. Crocodiles require clean rivers and accessible prey. When the environment shifts, their dominance can fade as quickly as it once grew. The Devonian seas taught this lesson when Dunkleosteus fell. Abundance became scarcity, power became burden. The hunter became vulnerable to the world it once ruled. Modern predators face similar pressures. Pollution and warming waters disrupt their habitats. Declining fish populations challenge their survival. Just as ancient changes reshaped the oceans, today's changes test the creatures that now hold the highest places in the food web. Their strength is not permanent. It is a reflection of balance. The story that begins with Dunkleosteus continues in the lives of these modern hunters. They show us that evolution is not a straight line. It circles, shifts, and adapts. It does not choose only one design. It chooses many. Each apex predator is an answer to the world that shaped it, just as Dunkleosteus was an answer to the Devonian Sea. The oceans are different now. The rivers are different. Yet the same questions remain. How does a predator survive? How does it shape the world around it? And how fragile is the balance that sustains it? When we look back across the long history of life on Earth, it becomes clear that some creatures do more than simply survive. They shape the world around them in ways that ripple far beyond their own lifetimes. Apex predators are among the most powerful influencers of their eras. Their presence drives change that affects not just the animals they hunt, but every layer of the ecosystem that surrounds them. Dunkleosteus was one of the first to show how a single species can transform the world. In the ancient Devonian seas, movement itself became a force of nature. The shape of the environment was not fixed. It was molded by the creatures that swam through it. Apex predators create kinetic landscapes. The ocean becomes dynamic because of them. Prey do not drift lazily. They scatter and move in response to danger. Reef systems shift when predators hunt near their edges. Prey fish search for new hiding places and deeper waters. Even the flow of nutrients changes as animals relocate to avoid becoming a meal. This is known as top-down control. It happens when the creatures at the top of the food chain determine the health and direction of the entire ecosystem. When Dunkleosteus swam through the Devonian seas, it did more than feed itself. It created fear. It inspired movement. It controlled the behavior of other creatures. Its actions influenced which species thrived and which ones faded away. In this way, the predator became a kind of architect. It shaped the structure of the ocean through its presence alone. As Dunkleosteus hunted, evolution responded. The prey species did not remain unchanged. They developed thicker shells and faster movements. Some grew spines, others shifted their habits and migrated into different environments. The arms race between predator and prey became a force that pushed evolution forward. Scientists call this predator driven evolution. It means that the existence of a powerful hunter can spark innovation in the creatures that encounter it. New traits emerge, new behaviors appear. Life becomes more complex because survival demands it. Over many generations, these pressures changed the Devonian world. The reef systems became more diverse. The open waters grew busier. Small fish developed better defenses. Shells grew stronger. Even the earliest sharks responded by improving their speed and agility. Dunkleosteus did not only influence one group of animals, it influenced the entire era. It became a keystone of its world, holding the ecosystem together by its presence. Yet there is always a delicate balance between power and vulnerability. Apex predators are often the most impressive creatures in an environment, but they are also among the most fragile. Their dominance depends on the world remaining stable. They need food and space to survive. They require the lower levels of the food chain to remain healthy. When the environment shifts, they are the first to feel the impact. This balance is not a contradiction, it is part of the story of life. When resources are plentiful, apex predators thrive. When conditions change, their strength becomes a burden. We saw this in the decline of Dunkleosteus when the late Devonian ocean began to collapse. The predator that once controlled the seas found itself unable to adapt. Its power could not compensate for the loss of prey and habitat. The strength that once brought dominance could not save it from extinction. Despite its fall, the legacy of Dunkleosteus continued. Its reign triggered an evolutionary chain reaction. The prey species that evolved thicker shells and faster reflexes continued to refine those traits after the predator disappeared. Early sharks that rose to fill the void grew in number and variety. Some species became smaller and quicker, others became larger and more efficient. New predators emerged, each carrying echoes of the ancient arms race. Life did not pause when Dunkleosteus vanished. It transformed. Each adaptation and innovation became part of a wider story. Over millions of years, the ripple effects of the Devonian arms race shaped the future oceans. The same patterns appeared again and again in different creatures and different ages. Apex predators continued to influence their environments. They continued to drive evolution and keep the balance between species. Even today, the idea remains unchanged. When large predators disappear from an ecosystem, prey populations shift, vegetation changes, water quality declines, the landscape itself is altered. In every era, predators hold the threads that connect species. Their influence stretches far beyond the moment of the hunt. Dunkleosteus was one of the first great examples of this. Its presence reshaped the ancient seas. Its fall opened the door for new predators. Its story reveals how deeply connected life has always been. The world does not stand still, it is always in motion, guided by the creatures that live within it. The evolutionary chain reaction that began in the Devonian seas continues in every ocean and river today. It reminds us that every era is shaped not just by who survives, but by who rules. For all the knowledge we have gathered from fossils, for all the technology and careful study, Dunkleosteus still keeps many parts of its life hidden. The armored skulls tell us about power. The bite marks reveal its strength and its role as a predator. Yet there are questions that the rock has not answered. There are quiet mysteries that remain suspended in time. One of the most intriguing questions concerns how Dunkleosteus lived alongside others of its kind. Was it a solitary hunter, or did it swim through the ancient seas in groups? Many modern apex predators choose one path or the other. Orcas hunt together in coordinated strategies. Great white sharks wander alone, joining others only for short periods. Fossil beds sometimes show clusters of Dunkleosteus remains close to each other, but this does not fully reveal behavior. It might mean that the animals shared a hunting ground, or that they were drawn to the same environments in life and in death. It might also suggest that their final moments brought them together. We simply do not know. Scientists continue to ask whether Dunkleosteus communicated with others. Did it defend territories? Did it display dominance or hierarchy? Did males and females differ in size or shape? These questions linger like faint outlines around the fossils. The ancient armored plates keep their silence. Another mystery that remains is the exact body mass of Dunkleosteus. Without the full skeleton, the creature's true size is difficult to calculate. Estimates vary. Some reconstructions imagine a large and muscular fish, heavy and powerful. Others suggest a more streamlined form, shaped for speed and sudden bursts of movement. The head alone does not reveal the full form. Bone plates show strength, but not weight. Scientists continue to refine their models, adjusting their estimates as new fossils and new comparisons appear. Yet the true mass remains uncertain, suspended somewhere in the possibility of stone. The question of movement follows next. Did Dunkleosteus migrate across vast regions of the ocean, traveling through ancient currents to follow prey or breeding grounds? Or did it stay close to particular coastal areas where food was abundant? Modern ocean predators often travel great distances. Some cross entire oceans in their lifetime. Others remain in smaller territories where prey is predictable. Fossils have been found in many parts of the world, suggesting that Dunkleosteus was widespread. But fossils alone do not reveal travel patterns. They show where an animal died, not where it lived. Similarly, the maximum size of Dunkleosteus continues to be debated. Most fossils suggest an animal several meters long. A few suggest even greater lengths. But without complete skeletons, we cannot be certain. The exact dimensions are hidden in the missing cartilage and the long vanished tail. Scientists draw careful comparisons to related species, studying the proportions of the armored skull, the thickness of the bone, and the spacing of the plates. Even this provides only guidance. The full scale remains an unanswered question. Breeding grounds are another mystery. Did Dunkleosteus lay eggs in shallow coastal regions or give birth in deeper waters? Some of its relatives show signs of internal fertilization, hinting that it may have produced live young, but no fossil nests or juvenile remains have been found. The ocean floor of the Devonian era was constantly shifting. Sediments changed, reefs rose and collapsed, rivers emptied into the sea and reshaped coastlines. If breeding grounds existed, their traces may be buried beneath layers of rock or lost to time. Scientists also wonder how far Dunkleosteus traveled in the course of its life. Was it capable of long-range journeys across open ocean? Did it migrate with the seasons or the rise and fall of ancient prey populations? These questions are difficult to answer, even for modern marine species. For an extinct predator that lived hundreds of millions of years ago, they remain even more elusive. And then there is the final question. Why was the extinction so abrupt? The fall of Dunkleosteus was not gradual. It seemed to vanish quickly from the fossil record. We know that the late Devonian extinction reshaped the oceans. We know that oxygen levels changed, habitats collapsed, and prey became scarce. But why did Dunkleosteus disappear so completely? Why did other lineages survive, while the great armored predator did not? The fossils hold clues, but not the full explanation. Perhaps it was a combination of forces: environmental instability, loss of food, competition from rising shark species. Perhaps it was the burden of its own design, a strategy that became less suited to the shifting world. Or perhaps the true cause lies in a sequence of events that left no trace at all. These questions remain, not because the story is incomplete, but because the past still possesses a quiet depth. Dunkleosteus keeps secrets in its stone bones. It reminds us that science is always searching, always listening. There are answers we do not yet have, and mysteries that still rest beneath ancient oceans. Across the long story we have followed, the ancient seas of the Devonian have unfolded like a slow awakening. We have walked through an age when life grew confident in open water, when new forms rose to test their strength against one another, and when Earth's first great ocean empire took shape. It was an era of bold experiments, and in those experiments we see the earliest outlines of the world that would follow. The seas were filled with creatures that had never existed before. They were filled with ideas that nature had never attempted. Some of those ideas endured, others disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. The Devonian did not only give the world its first giant predators, it gave Earth a new kind of complexity. Before this time, the oceans were quieter and simpler. The living world had not yet learned how to split into roles and strategies. But in these waters, evolution learned to weave entire ecosystems shaped by motion, speed, strength, and defense. It was here that the balance between hunter and hunted became a dance that would repeat for millions of years afterward. Every era that followed would echo what the Devonian began. Dunkleosteus was one of the most dramatic expressions of this change. It was the embodiment of a new kind of dominance: powerful jaws, strong armor, a design crafted for the world it ruled. Yet the story of this creature is not only about strength, it is also about the delicate balance that every apex predator depends on. Dominance is never permanent. In nature, power is a temporary gift. It is tied to the conditions that support it. When those conditions change, even the most commanding forms fade. The rise and fall of Dunkleosteus remind us of this truth. For a time it stood at the top of a world filled with thick-shelled prey, fast-moving schools of fish, and complex reef systems. It fed on creatures that themselves had evolved unique defenses and strategies. It shaped the seas around it. But when the world shifted, its power became fragile. The changing oceans brought new stresses and new challengers. The stability that had once favored heavy armor and crushing jaws began to disappear. In the end, the great predator vanished. But its story did not end entirely. The fossils that remain are like messages from deep time. They carry the outline of an ancient life. Each bone plate holds the memory of muscle and motion. Each bite mark whispers about the strength that once closed around it. They are quiet voices across impossible distances. They remind us that Earth keeps the record of its past in stone and sediment. They show us that even creatures that disappear still leave a trace of their purpose. When we hold these fossils or study them in light and shadow, we are not only learning about a fish, we are learning about the history of life's imagination. Evolution does not move in a straight line. It searches. It tries new paths, new shapes, new solutions. Some of those designs are refined through time. Others vanish, leaving only their outlines behind. The Devonian was one of the first great chapters in this story. It was the moment when nature realized the power of innovation. Every heavy armored plate, every sharp jaw, every new way of finding food or avoiding danger, all of it was part of a lesson that life was learning. The oceans were the first arena where the world began to shape itself through contests of adaptation. These contests never truly end. They continue today in the movements of sharks through modern seas, in the migrations of orcas, in the silent watch of crocodiles, and in the sweep of predators across the ocean floor. The echoes of Dunkleosteus still flow through these waters. As we drift away from this ancient world, there is no need for abrupt endings. The Devonian does not vanish suddenly in our minds. It recedes like the tide. The reefs soften in the growing distance. The armored fish settle into shadow. What remains is not the image of a monster, but the memory of a world in motion, a world learning to express itself through strength and struggle, a world discovering how life can change, expand, collapse, and rise again. The fossils of Dunkleosteus rest quietly in stone, yet they continue to speak. They carry the story of an age when the oceans were ruled by giants we can scarcely imagine. They carry the reminder that every moment in life's history is part of a greater pattern, a pattern of bold experiments and gentle endings, a pattern of power that always yields to new conditions, a pattern of survival and extinction that shapes the path toward the present. If there is anything that lingers with you now, let it be a sense of curiosity. The Devonian is only one chapter in the long dream of Earth. There are countless worlds that came before and countless that followed. Each held its own wonders, each left its own clues. Dunkleosteus was not the end of a story, it was a single turn in a vast unfolding journey, and somewhere within that journey, the oceans still carry the memory of that first great empire. The water still holds the whisper of ancient armor, the world still remembers,